All right, hello everyone, and welcome to day 2 of JRSA's Fall Research Gathering. Once again, my name is Susan Howley, and I'm a program director here at JRSA. We have another full half day planned, and we are so glad that you're able to join us again. First, a couple of housekeeping measures. I want to remind you all that you have an opportunity to request any of the slides from this two-day event as part of the feedback survey. You will receive an email with a link to that feedback survey following the conclusion of today's events. Also, please enter your questions for presenters at any time. You can use that question tab that you see over, it's one of the gray bars that you see over in the dialog box. We will be moderating those questions, but go ahead and put them in as soon as you think about them. Finally, we're going to conclude today with a special session on some plans that JRSA has in store. So I hope that you can stay with us for the whole afternoon. We have some very exciting things planned. Our first session today relates to the 2021 winners of the Douglas Yearwood Publications Contest. So I'm going to invite Brad Brick to come on camera and get us started with that session. Brad?
All right, hello. Thank you for the introduction, Susan. Oh, my webcam is off, so I apologize for that. Thank you for the introduction, Susan. I want to first give a couple of words about the Yearwood Award in general before talking a little bit about our presenters today. So, good afternoon, everyone. I'm extremely pleased to be involved in this panel of presentations by the 2021 winners of the Douglas Yearwood National Publication Award. The Yearwood Award recognizes outstanding efforts by statistical analysis centers to apply empirical analysis to criminal justice policy making in the states. Criminal justice experts from the academic and research communities evaluated the participants' publications based on effectiveness and appropriate use of criminal justice data and methods, clear and comprehensive discussion of findings, and thorough, innovative dissemination of information. A few words about the Douglas Yearwood National Publication Award. JRSA's National Publication Award was originally established in 1986 as the Philip Hoke Award in memory of the first Louisiana SAC director and one of the founders of JRSA. The award was renamed in 2012 in memory of longtime North Carolina SAC director and former JRSA president Douglas Yearwood. Doug himself was a winner of the Hoke Publication Award and published in JRSA's peer-reviewed journal. Under his leadership, the North Carolina SAC served as a model for the role SACs can play in state government. Prior to becoming SAC director, Doug worked as an information systems planner and social research associate with the Governor's Crime Commission. He held research positions with the State Attorney General's Office and the Federal Bureau of Prisons and was an advanced certified law enforcement planner through the International Association of Law Enforcement Planners. The Douglas Yearwood Award is given in two categories. First, research and policy analysis reports that pose one or more specific research or evaluation question and typically employing a specific research design to address the issues raised. And second, statistical or management reports, which present data that identify and describe one or more justice-related issue. Now, within each of these categories, we give awards based on the size of the agency's staff. Awards are given to small SACs with fewer than 5 full-time staff and large SACs with 5 or more full-time staff. This year, we were able to give out 3 awards. It was sort of an odd year with the number of submissions that we had, given all of the intervening circumstances around COVID-19, and we received a few less submissions than we usually do. But in today's in today's session, we'll hear from two of our three awardees, as one awardee could not make it today. We've asked the awardees to address the following 4 points in their presentation. First, who was the intended audience for the publication and how was it determined? Second, what does that audience's information need? What was that audience's information need and how was that identified? Third, how does that audience prefer to absorb information and how do you know that? And given those first 3 items, what was the process by which you decided how to structure, format, and present your report? Now, before I turn the floor over to the 2021 Yearwood Award winners, I want to recognize the judges who agreed to volunteer their time and review and provide comments to all of the contestant publications. This year we had 8 judges review the applicant publications. We had 4 judges in each category, including 4 judges that represented last year's Yearwood Award winning SACs, and 4 judges from the academic and research community. On behalf of all of us at JRSA, I would like to thank Kelly Officer, Thomas Strauss, Jerry Mulrow, and Ed McGarrell for their reviews in the research and policy analysis category, and Chris Henning, Thea Mounts, Connie Kostelak, and James Nolan for the reviews in the statistical and management categories. So without further ado, I would like to introduce the award winners for this year's 2021 Douglas Yearwood National Publication Award. Let me first start with the one winner who was unable to attend today, and that's in the small SAC statistical management category. The winner in this category was the Utah Commission on Criminal and Juvenile Justice for their publication entitled Justice Reinvestment Initiative Update, Annual Report to Legislature, November 2020. Unfortunately, the presenter, Ben Peterson, was unable to be here as he's filling in on emergency fill-in for the SAC director in Utah, who is meeting with the governor today. Judges had this to say about Utah's publication. The presentation of key findings with links to the associated graphs and discussions was very effective for conveying a large quantity of information to a lay audience, and also that policymakers would be able to easily find the information they need in this report. Now, moving on to the winners who are in attendance today will be presenting their findings. I'm going to introduce them in the order in which they will be presenting today. So our first presentation today will come from the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council of the District of Columbia, and they were the winners in the large SAC Research and Policy Analysis section. Their study, a study of the root causes of juvenile justice system involvement, will be presented by Christy Love, who was one of the authors of that publication. The judges determined that this publication was a solid mixed method design with a wealth of administrative data supplemented by surveys and focus groups, and that the report presents the results of complex analyses in a user-friendly fashion accessible to non-researchers. And our second presentation today will be the winner of the large SAC Statistical and Management section. And this award went to the Illinois Criminal Justice Information Authority. And their publication, the preliminary look at Illinois arrest trends during the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020, will be presented by Jessica Reichert. And what the judges said about this publication was that it was a very timely analysis given the topic of the arrest trends during the COVID-19 pandemic, and that the report was written in a clear and concise way that most generalized audiences should understand, and that the visual display of the data made the report relatively easy to follow. So on behalf of JRSA, I would first like to offer my congratulations to the winners, and I would also like to turn it over to Christy to lead us with our presentation and discussion of the winning publications.
First, I'm going to do the sound check, make sure everyone can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you fine. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So my name is Christy Love, and I'm the Deputy Executive Director of the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, or the CJCC, for the District of Columbia. And so the DC SAC is actually a part of the CJCC. And I have to say that we are really honored to be one of the recipients of the Douglas Yearwood Award for our study of the root causes of juvenile justice system involvement. But before I go any further, I really have to give honor to where honor is due. And so I want to acknowledge Dr. Caitlin Sill. So Caitlin actually was a statistician with the DC SAC. She's really the mastermind behind this study. She led the data collection, which was actually no easy feat. Also the data analysis, and she was the author of this report. And we really think she did a fabulous job, and we're super excited that JRSA and the panel agreed with that assessment. And so Caitlin has actually moved on from the DC SAC. She took a position with NIJ, but we actually invited her to be here today because we just want to thank her and acknowledge her for her great work. So related to the 4 questions that Brad and Susan asked that we addressed in our presentation, I'm going to actually cover 3 things today. And so first, I'm just going to give a general background, sort of the impetus behind this study, what the research questions were, and a very high-level overview of the study approach. And then I'll share some of the key findings and recommendations, and then talk about some of the communication strategies that I think made this report pretty effective. So with respect to the background, what was the genesis for this study? And so it was really legislation that was passed by the DC Council in 2016, and it was the Comprehensive Youth Justice Amendment Act. And it included a provision for the CJCC to conduct analysis of the root causes of youth crime and the prevalence of adverse childhood experiences. So I just want to point out a couple of things about this legislation, and we included an excerpt here. And so it actually identifies the primary audience for us, the mayor and the DC Council. It actually identifies some of the factors that we were to include in this analysis. So you see housing instability, childhood abuse, family instability, substance abuse, and of course other factors that we deem relevant. And it actually prescribed that we conduct a survey of justice-involved youth. So we took the legislative language and came up with these 3 research questions. So the first is, what are the differences between justice-involved youth and non-justice-involved youth? And by justice-involved, we included arrested, petitioned, or convicted. And then secondly, what are the factors that affect the likelihood that youth will become involved in the juvenile justice system? And then third, we really wanted to understand how and why do these factors affect youth likelihood. And so in terms of the study approach, it was really a 4-part approach. And so we collected administrative data from a number of partners, so juvenile justice, education, human services, child welfare agencies. And the reason for that is because we wanted to conduct a multivariate regression analysis to identify the factors that actually had a statistical impact on the likelihood of juvenile justice system involvement. And then we supplemented that statistical analysis with interviews of dozens of representatives from youth-serving nonprofits and government agencies in the district. We conducted a number of focus groups with justice-involved youth, and as the legislation stated, we conducted surveys of justice-involved youth. So in terms of some of the key findings and recommendations, I really want to focus on just one of those research questions, and I think this is probably the question that was of greatest interest to those that requested this study, and it's what factors affect the likelihood that youth will become involved in the justice system. So here are the factors. These are the statistically significant factors that affect the likelihood of juvenile justice system involvement. And so we group them into a number of categories: demographic, economic, childhood maltreatment, neighborhood environment, educational experience, as well as mental and behavioral health disorders, as well as IEP. So I'm going to put a pin in the factors. I'm going to come back to this, but I wanted to go to something else. So we use the model to actually divide the youth into quartiles based on their average probability of becoming justice involved. And so this, I think, by dividing this into quartiles, it really lets us know who we need to focus our efforts on. And so if you take a look at the fourth quartile and compare their average probability of 13.9% likelihood of becoming justice involved, to say the third quartile, which is 2.1%, or even the first quartile, 0.3%, that is a stark difference. And it was enough to say, you know what, we really need to focus our attention and even some of our analysis really on this fourth quartile, because those are the youth that, you know, we would want to target any prevention and intervention efforts towards. So just a bit about more about the youth in this fourth quartile. And so when you take a look at the youth who actually ended up becoming justice involved, it turns out that 83% of the justice involved youth were in this fourth quartile. So again, that tells us this is the group that we need to focus on, that we really need to hone our attention towards. And then we provided essentially a profile of these youth. So we have demographic characteristics at the top. The average age was 15 and a half. You know, it was mostly male. Then we have economic factors. So we see here about 20% were receiving TANF. 89% were Medicaid eligible. And then we go to childhood maltreatment. We actually see that the youth in this quartile, 47% had reported childhood neglect. And then going to educational experiences. So we see that 36.7% of them have been suspended from school. And if we move over to looking at unexcused absences, so on average, the youth in this group had 32 unexcused absences from school. And then we move on to the mental health and behavioral health issues, IEP, and then you see neighborhood environment. So we wanted to understand to what extent do these youth live in close proximity to crime. And so what you see here, we call this the hot block. We actually looked at the extent to which these youth actually lived on the blocks in the district that were experiencing the most gun violence. So now I'm going to take you back to the factors, but this time we're going to look at the impact that the factors had just on the highest risk youth. And so here we have, starting with, and the factors are listed in order of their relative effect on justice system involvement. So here we have the factor that had the greatest effect was unexcused absences. No surprise, because you saw previously the number of unexcused absences for this highest risk group. So the youth who had more than the average number of unexcused absences were 3 times as likely to become justice system involved as high-risk youth that did not have or had fewer than the average number. Another thing to note here is that when you kind of look at this list of factors, most of the factors at the top of the list are actually related to the youth's educational experience. I already talked about unexcused absences, but then we see that youth who have IEPs, but coupled with a comorbid disorder, they're 2 times as likely to become justice involved. Youth who change schools mid-year, youth who are grade retained or held back a grade, youth who are suspended. So what this really told us is that education partners really can potentially play a crucial role in reducing juvenile justice system involvement. So of course, as I mentioned earlier, in addition to the statistical analysis, we did interviews and focus groups and surveys. And so that those efforts actually identified some additional explanatory factors. And so those included peer influence or future uncertainty, essentially a lack of hope, and then also lack of exposure to alternatives where youth didn't even realize that there's another path that they could be taking. But I wanted to go back to this idea of future uncertainty and kind of move over to the snapshot that we have from the surveys. And I remember when I first saw this, this really struck me. But this first question of, I will die of any causes before I turn 25. And just looking at the number of youth who said, well, maybe they didn't know. They didn't know if they would die before they were 25. And then you had other youth who said, yeah, I probably am going to die before I turn 25. So just wanting to acknowledge that that uncertainty about their future, does play a role in juvenile justice system involvement. And so, of course, what the analysis does, right, it identifies risk, it identifies the problem, but we just didn't want to leave it there. We wanted to be sure to offer solutions to the requesters and our partner agencies. And so I really, I said this was a 4-part research methodology. I should have added a 5th part, and that was an extensive literature review to identify evidence-based practices to reduce juvenile justice system involvement. And so here we have a list. We have the Becoming a Man program, and I'm actually happy to say that several districts of Columbia Public Schools will be implementing the Becoming a Man program starting in 2022. A couple of other recommendations here: cross-age peer mentoring and year-round employment programs. Okay, so now I just want to talk a little bit about communication strategies. And so I think one of those is providing key findings and summarizing them up front. So, I already mentioned that the primary audience laid out in the legislation was the mayor and the DC Council. And then the CJCC, we actually work on behalf of a council, and the members on that council are actually the heads of the district's local and federal criminal justice agencies. And then, of course, we knew that this report was going to be made available to the general public. So the body of the report, from the start up through the recommendations, it's 83 pages. And if you factor in the entire report with appendices, it's 143 pages. So we have to realize it's highly unlikely that elected officials and senior leaders are going to read an 83-page report, let alone a 143-page report. So it's really important to have a really tight but also thorough executive summary, and then also this study overview, which provided the background of the study and an overview of the study approach. And so I like to say everything you really need to know about this report can be found in the first 13 pages. So of course, that's a much more reasonable, page length to expect, like I said, elected officials and senior leaders to read. Second, I think this report was very easy to navigate and had and part of that is because of the consistent report structure. So it just struck me, a couple of weeks ago, I was looking again at the report, and I said, you can actually just look at the table of contents and see what the factors were that increased the likelihood of juvenile justice system involvement. And so I think just the table of contents makes this report very easily skimmable. So if you want to learn more about, well, how does grade retention relate to juvenile justice system involvement? You can go to page 40 and you're going to get what you need. And then each section is structured in the same way. So when you get to that particular category of factors, we start out with a bottom line statement, how much this particular factor increases the likelihood of justice system involvement. You have the graphic that shows how this factor affects each quartile. And then you have the narrative information that brings in related perspectives from the interviews and focus groups and the related research. So I know it's important for me for reports to be skimmable, and I think the structure of this report allows for that. Excuse me. I think the next strategy was having compelling and standalone graphics. And really, I think Caitlin did a great job, and I know she put a lot of thought and time into creating these graphics. And so the important thing is, when I say standalone, you don't need the supporting narrative to understand the story that these graphics are trying to tell. And so we've just provided a sample of some of the graphics, but really the report is filled with graphics just like this. And then lastly, the last thing a researcher wants to do is spend 2 years conducting this study and for the report to just sit on someone's shelf, actual shelf or virtual shelf, and collect dust. And so one way that we countered that and made sure that didn't happen is we continued the conversation post-issuance. And so the CJCC, we actually have a policy team that conducts a number of webinars and summits and conferences. And so we actually had a juvenile justice webinar series, and we dedicated the fiscal year 21 juvenile justice webinar series entirely to this root cause analysis report. So we had 4 sessions. First, we had an overview. The first session was just an overview of the study findings and recommendations. The second session, we actually brought in the senior leaders of the youth serving agencies and asked them to respond or react to the findings and report. And then we asked them, what actions can you take to mitigate some of the risks that were identified in this report? And then third, we had a session, we brought in youth. We got their take on the study findings. We got their take on solutions and recommendations. And then finally, we had a session where we brought in representatives from across the country who were implementing some of these evidence-based programs that we included in our recommendations. So, for example, I mentioned Becoming a Man. We invited the national director of the Becoming a Man program to talk about the program structure and activities, the successes they've had in other jurisdictions. And then he was really happy to announce that Becoming a Man would be coming to the district in the next several months. And then finally, we have a number of committees and work groups, some of which are dedicated just to juvenile justice issues. And so again, when we were trying to identify goals and priorities for those work groups, we turned to the root cause analysis report. And so these work groups for, really 2021 focused on identifying prevention and intervention efforts for that high-risk group, the top 25% that we were talking about. And we actually engaged in a really interesting exercise where we took youth who repeatedly came to the attention of the justice system. And we had deep dive discussions. So, we mentioned it's not just juvenile justice agencies that have stake here. It's education agencies, it's human services, child welfare. We brought them all to the table and just talked about 10 youth and said, okay, what are the challenges that these youth are facing? And then we also said, well, what are some system challenges or system gaps that maybe we can address to help prevent these youth from returning to the system? So that is our report. That's the communication strategies we took with respect to this study. And I am happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thanks, Christy. We have quite a few questions here. First, let me say that the graphics and the overall presentation of information was extremely engaging, I thought. And we have a couple of questions about how you all came up with those types of graphics and the effectiveness of them. So the first question is, are there certain types of graphics that are in the report that you have found that really catch the attention of your audience?
I actually, and then I know I stopped, excuse me, sharing my screen. Did I stop sharing my screen? I should have. I was gonna try to go back to one of the graphics that I thought was really effective, but let's try this
You
again.
should be, thank you. You should be able to reshare.
Okay, is it back now?
Yes, it is.
It is, yes.
Okay. I actually really like the first graphic that's here on the left. That's just comparing the justice involved to the not justice involved. And we had several graphics in the report that were along these lines. And it's just a really quick and easy way if you just want to compare the two populations. And so I know, you know, when, like I said, we have a number of committees and work groups. I know I've snagged this graphic a couple of times to sort of keep this report and the findings on the front burner. And I think this has been particularly helpful for a number of our partner agencies.
Excellent. And a related question to graphics is from Bailey Merrifield, and she asks, do you have any tips for developing color schemes for your reports? Are there any resources that you utilize, or is it just trial and error and whatever you feel looks good?
So I know, and I don't know the details of this, but I do know that we are fortunate to have a public information officer who has, I know, looked into what color schemes are effective, and we actually have like a color palette that we use for all of our graphics for the entire agency. So I know that she helped to advise us on that, and I do believe Caitlin had done her own research on just effective graphics as well.
All right, excellent. A question from Mark Myron. And he asks, was the identification of factors related to system involvement based on one or more classical theories of delinquency?
So I know that we developed the factors, you know, largely based on the literature review. So it's, you know, we did not just think, oh, what should we include in this statistical model? It was based on, you know, prior research and factors that contributed to juvenile delinquency, you know, based on that other research. I hope that answers the question.
I think so. I think so. Excuse me. And then one more question. Oh, here we go. From Christine Denman. And she asks, what software do you use to create the graphics that were included in the report?
And this, I should have reached out to Caitlin, and I don't know if she's still on. Adobe is what is coming to mind, but I am not certain. And it looks like she still may be there. And if Caitlin, if you are able to share that in the chat, that would be really great. And it looks like she may have done that.
Yes, she said it was Adobe InDesign.
There we go.
All right. Excellent, excellent. Any more questions out there? If you have them, go ahead and type them into the questions box. We should have a little bit of time at the end of the second presentation to go over any questions that you have for Christy. Otherwise, Christy, thank you very much for sharing this compelling research. And any questions we have for you, we'll hold till the end.
Sounds good.
All right. Well, now I would like to turn over the floor to, where'd it go? I'm sorry. To Jessica from Illinois. I was looking for my notes and I couldn't find them. Who is going to present the Illinois SACS research who won this year. So Jessica, you have the floor.
Hello, can you hear me? Can you see me?
Yes.
Great. So I'm going to share my screen. And can you see that?
We can.
Great. Okay. Well, first, I want to say thank you. We're honored to be the recipients of the Publication Awards. I do want to recognize my co-author of the study, which is Sharon Adams. And this report can be found on our website, and I'll provide a link at the end. And it was published March of this year. Here's just a funding note. So, what was the biggest news story of 2020 and arguably 2021? And if we were all in a room together, I'm sure we'd all say it was COVID-19. So that was sort of the jumping off point for deciding to do something related to COVID-19 and criminal justice. So our research question was, how did COVID-19 affect Illinois arrests and police practices? So as was mentioned earlier, JRSA asked us to answer a number of questions, and I'm going to do that. So first, who is the intended audience for the publication? We all saw this as potentially appealing to a broad audience, which would include the general public, definitely law enforcement, policymakers, and other researchers. What was the audience's information need? Well, last year there was a lot of speculation and confusion about some crime being up, some crime being down, and arrests being up or down. So since our agency has access to arrest records through the Illinois State Police, we hoped we could quickly get the data, write it, and publish it in an article to help aid in the understanding of what was going on with COVID-19 in terms of arrests. So we were able to publish it fairly quickly. It takes a long time to publish things usually, but it was, able to be released again March this year. So how does the audience prefer to absorb information? Since this could be for lay audience, we tried to make it easy to understand and have figures and not just a ton of text, trying to make sure it could be easily understood in terms of language, trying to explain or limit any jargon or acronyms. And then what was the process by which we decided how to structure, format, and present our report? So we did keep the background and literature review fairly short. One of the reasons was there wasn't a lot to go on at the time. There's mostly news media reports, so it couldn't be a very long literature review because it was a new area for everyone. But also that just kept it kind of tight and focused and not extremely long. And then we did, as I said, provide a lot of figures to visually depict the data. So, here I could just go to those and you can kind of see the story there. So I'm going to go over some of the key findings. So there were some reasons noted in the literature and, like I said, news outlets at the time for potential causes and reductions of some crimes. So first, there's changes in policing behaviors. So fewer police stops because of COVID, increases in the use of citations in lieu of making a contact and an arrest, and also other safety precautions due to COVID. And then stay-at-home orders and social distancing, that resulted in less opportunity for people to potentially commit crimes. Many people were ill or not going out in public, and lowering the risk for certain crimes like robberies or aggravated assaults and maybe some street drug sales where there's that interactions on the street. Also, because people were more likely to be at home, the risk for residential burglaries, maybe some car thefts, and similar crimes might have been reduced. And then the closing of schools may have resulted in less reporting of child abuse and neglect. And then finally, the reduced trust in police, potentially exacerbated by the death of George Floyd by police during the pandemic, may have made citizens less likely to trust police come forward with reporting of crime or providing information that would lead to an arrest or help with investigations. So then at the same time, there are also reasons noted for potential causes for increases in crime. So these include, historic racial and economic disparities that, remain remain in urban communities, and the pandemic exacerbated economic struggles, such as people leaving the workforce due to maybe retail or restaurant closings, or due to illness, or parents having to care for children. So more, even more economic struggles that could lead to further crime. And then behavioral health services during COVID were changed due to safety precautions. There may have been some undertreatment or changes in services, changes being more telehealth and less in person. And also, it was just a really stressful, uncertain time. And if there's maybe less access to some treatment, people may have turned to self-medicating or self-harm and those kinds of things. And finally, the stay-at-home orders may have increased some domestic violence in the home because families were together all the time, and it was also a very stressful time. So again, we examined the Illinois State Police criminal history record data on arrests made by law enforcement. I just always make this, I know we're amongst stack of people and researchers, but so this is not the number of offenses or crimes that happened, but the arrests made by police. So the data really speaks to police actions than all the offenses that may have been occurring in our state. Like, for example, DV and homicide, you'll see we know that there was reporting of higher incidences in 2020 than 2019, but arrests you'll see were lower. So just make that clear. So we examined adult misdemeanor and felony arrests for certain offenses, drug possession, drug manufacture and delivery, or drug dealing, domestic violence, and homicide. And they were chosen based on what the available literature and the news outlets were reporting. So we narrowed it down to focus on those rather than the whole world of arrests. So we looked at arrests during the same time frame from January to June in 2019 and 2020. So for all the arrest data, we looked at Illinois, which is actually Illinois with Chicago taken out, because Chicago often drives the numbers of arrests, so it made sense to have Illinois without Chicago and Chicago to look at them separately. So in Illinois, all arrests, the solid orange line, were way down from 2020 compared to 2019, which is the dotted line. And then the same with Chicago arrests, which are the blue lines. So dotted line is 19 and the solid is 2020. So hopefully that's easy to kind of see the difference. And then you'll see we noted in all these figures I'm going to show you both the time of the Illinois stay-at-home order, which was issued in our state in March 21st, 2020. And then I also indicated the social protests surrounding the death of George Floyd, which was starting around May 26th of 2020. And George Floyd died on May 25th. So those are important things to note that might have caused fluctuations there. You'll also see there was a big drop-off in arrests just prior to the issuance of the Illinois stay-at-home order, like about March 8th. And you'll see for each type of arrest in the following slides, we think this may be due to what was happening globally and in the U.S. even before the stay-at-home order was actually issued. And some of those things were the World Health Organization declared COVID-19 a pandemic back on March 11th. So that was kind of earlier than our stay-at-home order. And former President Trump declared it a national emergency on the 13th. On March 15th, the CDC recommended no gatherings over 50 people. March 17th, Trump administration asked Congress to fund direct financial relief. And then March 19th, California was the first state to issue the stay-at-home order. So these things may have in turn affected individual behaviors and activities and events, as well as law enforcement arrests and practices, which is interesting. So looking at just homicide arrests, and I want to note here that the data is shown by month rather than week because we have to suppress numbers that are less than 10, so we're trying to avoid that. So again, we see Illinois, all arrests, the solid orange line were lower than the dotted line, which is 2019, and same with Chicago. However, we do see Chicago ended this time period we were looking at in June with higher homicide arrests than the year before. And this was after the protests and the start of the summer, so potentially those had something to do with it. So looking at drug possession arrests, again, Illinois arrests were lower in 2020 after the stay-at-home order compared to 2019. Same with Chicago arrests. And then there was a major drop happening before the stay-at-home order, which is the black arrow. So right before, there was major drops, which is interesting. Okay, looking at drug dealing in Illinois, it's manufacturing delivery. So on the graph, we had to block out certain weeks that had less than 10. You'll see that sort of lines at the bottom in blue and white. So again, Illinois arrests, Chicago arrests, much lower in 2020 than 2019. And then you'll see there was a spike in Chicago arrests around week 20 and 21. So week 20 was the start of Memorial Day weekend. So not sure, but may have something to do with that because holidays. So finally, we looked at domestic violence arrests. Let's check the time. Okay. Finally, we did see the Illinois domestic violence arrests were lower, and in Chicago as well, although maybe less dramatic for Chicago, but so arrests were down. So here's all the arrest types that we looked at. You can see they all had reductions. The highest reductions were drug possession and drug manufacture delivery, which were the nonviolent offenses we examined. And then that was followed by domestic violence arrests and homicide arrests. So of all the arrest types collectively put together, the state had a 36% reduction in arrests, and Chicago had a 39% reduction in arrests. So the key takeaways are, again, arrests were down. We're looking at that first half of the year 2020 compared to the previous year. There was a drop in arrests we saw just preceding and just after the stay-at-home order. Little change around the protests, although a little bit, and then appears to be some changes in police practices and reporting. So this kind of supports what others have been reporting, that since the onset of the pandemic, law enforcement did shift priorities, scale back on arrests, particularly for low-level offenses, and time will tell what changes may last, if these reductions will continue this year, next year, so we'll see. So I also wanted to share the public dissemination strategy. So our article was posted on our website. It was emailed to our distribution list. We have thousands on our email list. We promote on social media, so Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and then we also had a webinar on COVID and criminal justice where we featured this presentation as one of the presentations. So this is kind of what our website looks like. So hopefully it's sort of appealing with a picture and people will keep reading. There's a link there. I shortened the link if you want to see it, but you can also find it pretty easily if you Google it. And then here's the webinar we did, Pandemic's Impact on Illinois Criminal Justice and Victim Services, Assessing Outcomes and Moving Forward. So we had this presentation and then another one on victim services impact, and then we had a number of guest speakers talk about it. And then here is my contact information, and I will stop sharing.
Right. Thank you, Jessica.
Thank you.
We have a couple of questions for you in the chat here. The first is from David Merriman, and he asks, and he says that the homicide reductions are interesting considering that there are jumps in those crime categories. Have you looked at crime against arrests for any of these crime categories?
I don't think we had we have access to arrest. We don't have access to reported offenses for the whole state until later when it comes out through UCR. So that may be, I'm not sure if it's available yet, but just due to the timing, all reported offenses, I don't think we're available to do that comparison. But it would be an interesting one.
Okay, excellent. Next question is from Mark Myron, and he asks, were you surprised by the fact that the domestic violence arrests did not increase substantially in Chicago following the stay-at-home order?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot of reporting of domestic violence incidents being up, but not arrests. So, you know, it is surprising, but there may be a lot of reasons behind that of not reporting it to the police. And if it's domestic violence, say man and woman living together, there's potentially more control over the person who is being abused because they're stuck in the same place. I don't know. I'm not sure, but it is something to sort of look into more. And I think that's kind of what this article does. It doesn't necessarily have all the answers to why everything happened, but it does lead you to maybe want to ask more questions and try to get some answers.
Okay. And the next question from Bailey, the words are hard today for me, by Bailey Merrifield was, she's wondering if you examined jail and prison releases in conjunction with the number of arrests, or do you have any plans to sort of look at what those trends look like in conjunction to the arrests?
We didn't. We just focused on the arrest. Again, that's the easiest for us to get. We don't have jail data for the whole state in one database. I don't know if other states might have that issue. We do have access to prison records, though, and that is something we could look at, but we just didn't for this article. We kind of kept focused on arrest.
Okay.
And also,
I'm sorry.
I was just thinking, also prison admissions, they often take a while. So if things are happening, we're looking at, a small portion of 2020. If there was some sort of change in prison admissions, that may not show up until later because they have to be processed through the court. So that might be something to look at, maybe now because time has passed to see fluctuations in prison admissions.
Okay. I was wondering if I could ask you a similar question to one of the questions that was asked of Christy earlier about any sort of like any sort of graphics that you included in the in the report that you thought were particularly useful in conveying the findings and what you wanted your readers to know?
Yeah, I mean, our article was shorter and we weren't as creative as Christy showed us. That was great. What I showed on the screen were just screenshots of the actual figures that we used. So just a simple trend, line graph to convey what happened during that period, which I think hopefully was successful with the solid lines and the dotted lines, to just quickly see the difference. That's all we went with for this, and hopefully it did the job.
Okay, one more question just came in. Have your reports prompted any additional questions from stakeholders or any other directions for future research?
Well, it was great having that webinar where we got to hear from actual officers. We had the head of the Illinois Association of Chiefs of Police, because I knew I would get the question like, why did this happen? What were police doing? Where someone like that could really provide context. So it was interesting for me to present the data and then have someone like that kind of talk about generally what police have been doing and kind of confirm some of the things we thought. I don't know, just some of the questions we got makes me kind of want to dig a little deeper now, just the questions we got today. So I might want to consider that, because we look at, if you do something quickly and you look at a small snippet of time, there's naturally more you can do later as time goes on and as the pandemic has continued on. So I'll definitely consider it.
And Christy, same question for you. I know it has the report and all of the follow-up dissemination that you all did in DC, has that prompted any additional questions from stakeholders or any future research directions that you all plan on taking?
Yes. So, like I said, we've kept the conversation going. So in a way, we've kind of forced, additional questions to come about. And like I mentioned, we've really been focusing on highest risk youth and engaging the education partners to make sure they're at the table, because clearly a lot of the risk factors come from the youth education experience. In terms of future research, so the legislative mandate, and I don't think I included that earlier, it actually required that we repeat this study every 2 years. But we did have a conversation with the council staff and said, well, I don't know if root causes, right, are going to change every 2 years. So we proposed some modifications moving forward. So next year, we're going to do the second iteration of this report, but there's going to be more emphasis on, okay, we understand that there's this top 25%, but at the same time, most of them don't end up in the justice system. So that study is actually going to focus on what pro-social factors are in place to prevent high-risk youth from becoming involved in the justice system. So that's going to be the next iteration.
All right, thank you. I see we have 1 minute left, so I want to cede that minute back over to Susan so she can give us our marching orders for the rest of the afternoon. But before I do so, let me congratulate Jessica and Christy one more time for their amazing presentations and amazing publications, and congratulate you for being the award winners for the 2021 Douglas Yearwood Award. And also, let me, in absentia, congratulate Ben and Utah for also winning. Susan, back to you.
All right, and I'm going to add my congratulations. Really fabulous job on those reports. And folks, you will be able to get a copy of those reports if, either on their sites or by or on the JRSA website, and we hope you'll take a moment to look through them. They're really inspirational uses of data. So thank you both. I love the sessions where we hear from the Yearwood Award winners. I think it's really inspiring and gives me new ideas for writing reports, and I'm sure that's true for all of you. All right, folks, we're going to pause for a 5-minute break, but I encourage you to be on time coming back, because when you come back, we're going to hear from the staff at BJS, and we're really looking forward to that. Now, I'd like to welcome you back for updates from the Bureau of Justice Statistics. We are delighted to have this opportunity to hear from Kevin Scott, who is the new Deputy Director of Statistical Operations at BJS. Joining Kevin Scott is Devin Adams, Chief of Criminal Justice Data Improvement Programs, as well as Stephanie Burrows, who's the Justice Statistics Policy Analyst. Folks, I know that this is a great opportunity for you to ask your questions of BJS staff, and I know that they welcome your questions. So please don't have any hesitation about using that questions tab. And with that, I'm going to invite Kevin Scott to take the floor.
All right. I want to make sure I'm sharing the right screen.
Right now we have a beautiful background with some mountain goats. There we go.
Changed?
Yes.
Okay. Perfect. I think that's Grand Teton, or Denali. I believe that's Denali. I wish I were the one who had taken that picture. All right. Well, Susan, thank you for having me. And while this is my first, I'm on early in my tour as the Deputy Director of Statistical Operations at BJS. I have been at BJS since 2017. I've been the chief of both the law enforcement unit and the courts and prosecutions unit. And I'm excited about the opportunity to get a chance to talk to you all today. I want to talk briefly at a kind of high level about some of the things that we're most excited about that we've accomplished. And to stress that while we're inclined, of course, to sit around and rest on our laurels, we also have great plans for 2022. And I want to talk about some of those, and I want to have a chance to answer any questions you all might have about what we're up to in the coming year. Oh, that's the wrong one. Right. I have to do this by mouse. All right. In FY 2021, we maintained 50 data collections, 17 of which were annual data collections that we collect data on every year. We had a total of 24 data collections in the field in fiscal year 2021. One of the challenges for us, there have been a number of challenges related to the pandemic, but one of the most significant kind of limitations on our activities has been our inability to kind of conduct normal field operations, both in the NCVS, although those have largely been restored, and in our attempts to survey inmates in local jails and in prisons. Those projects have largely been on frozen since March of 2020 and remain frozen for the foreseeable future. We released a lot of reports in the fiscal year 2021. We released 63 of them. We had 4 press releases, 16 one-page summaries, 2 data tools, and 57 data sets. We're really happy with kind of clearing out some of our backlog and trying to get caught up on our release of publications and trying to get back onto a regular schedule so that people know and can expect when to see particularly our annual publication. We responded to 230 media requests and 1,376 Ask BJS emails. Kind of non-recurring things, as I hope all of you know, we launched a new webpage. That new webpage is almost entirely 508 compliant. We now added to our Twitter account with a Facebook page. I think the TikTok BJS account is pretty far off. And we issued 98 awards as an agency. 2 months and 2 days into fiscal year 2022, we have already released 18 publications, and we are scheduled to release 7 more publications before December 31st. We will be releasing no publications on New Year's Eve, so you can take that day off from anticipating BJS reports. We also released in the last month the new NDASH, which is a data analysis tool for the National Crime Victimization Survey. It replaces and significantly updates NVAT, which was the National Victimization Analysis Tool. And I post the webpage address here. It's just ncvs.bjs.ojp.gov. If you go to that without the home, you'll eventually get to the right place without any difficulty. And for those of you who have not yet looked at the NDASH, it's a really nifty tool. And this is a screenshot, so I won't interact on the screenshot, but the tool gives you the opportunity to do some quick graphics and to do some custom graphics and custom analysis. You can do multi-year trend comparison, you can do single-year comparison, and you can do year-to-year comparison. And I think that you'll find this tool is significantly enhances the ability both of the casual user and the more kind of in-depth user who wants to kind of get a good look at what the NCVS data are telling us about victimization in the United States. The new 2022 projects, those things that we awarded last year that we're kind of getting underway, we're doing the National Census of Victim Service Providers, again, for the first time, I think, in 5 years. And we're doing that with JRSA as the awardee, which we're excited about. We're doing our Census of Law Enforcement Training Academies. The last one of those was in 2018. That should be developed in 2022 and put in the field in 2023. And we're starting a new project, which is, and actually the word pilot should be at the end of this, is a pilot for what we're calling the local jail reporting program. And the kind of essential component of this project is that we're looking for micro data, that is individual level stay data from local jails, and trying to figure out what local jails can provide us, how current the data is that they can provide us, that is how quickly and how rapidly they can provide us, and our ability to kind of standardize across jails. And so we'll be working on that effort starting here probably early in the new year to try to figure out if we can get more kind of current numbers on the kind of, and a better idea kind of turnover in local jails, and get kind of more granular data and be able to better understand what's going on in our nation's jails than we're able to with the aggregate data collections that we've been doing for a very long time. Thinking about kind of how we are moving forward in the next fiscal year as we kind of think through our program plan, there are kind of two things that we take into consideration, and I say take into consideration because we're never, we don't, as an independent federal statistical agency, we're cognizant of kind of the importance of our independence and our ability to make kind of decisions about what we think and listen to stakeholders and to the public about what are kind of the key data needs in the criminal justice arena. But at the same time, we are told to do things by Congress, and we're not immune. We're kind of aware of kind of the broader political environment, and that's not to say that we, reflexively adopt those priorities, but we're kind of cognizant of how those priorities reflect a changing world. And so in any year when Congress actually passes appropriations legislation, and they haven't yet for FY 2022, it doesn't look like they're going to until at least February, they will include in the bill and report language specific asks or directions of BJS. And so we anticipate being asked to try to figure out how to better collect data on solitary confinement, being told that by the House of Representatives. The Senate is asking us to, I think it's probably accurate to say, restart development of the pilot campus climate survey on sexual assault, the work that continued, that was largely stopped in about 2018. And then for the second consecutive year, the Senate is asking us to cooperate or participate or augment the work of the FBI to try to collect data on police suicide. And I say augment because the FBI is planning to start their new data collection from law enforcement agencies and other criminal justice agencies on suicides and attempted suicides at the beginning of the calendar year in early January 2022. And the asterisk here is the disclaimer that, again, none of this legislation is actually passed. So these requirements may or may not actually end up in the final report or in the final bill. But these are the things that we kind of are monitoring and kind of trying to pay attention to and be responsive to. At the same time, we're aware of kind of different priorities from the administration. And the three that we kind of have encountered on a regular basis over the past, I guess it's 11 months, 10 and a half months now, there's President Biden issued an executive order on his first day in office with a very long title. But the key to that is that it included what's called an equitable data working group. And that working group is tasked with identifying inadequacies in existing federal data collection programs. And that would include statistical collections like those conducted by the Bureau of Justice Statistics. And so we've been kind of aware of those efforts and monitoring those efforts, and we expect directives to come out of those efforts that may impact how we do some of our data collection. This administration, both the Attorney General and the President, have articulated a clear support for access to justice, including reestablishing the White House Legal Aid Interagency Roundtable and an Office on Access to Justice here at the Department of Justice. So we expect that to kind of be a priority moving forward as well, and something that people are, continually interested in data on. And I think this is not in any way new, but about a month ago, the President issued an executive order to try to help address the crisis of missing or murdered Indigenous people. And part of that includes a strategy for ongoing analysis of data collected on violent crime and missing persons involving Native Americans. And obviously, we have data collections that can help kind of fill that gap. And so we expect to kind of play a role as those efforts kind of continue to move forward. At this point, that's really all I have to say. I think it probably is best. We can either, Stephanie, Devin, and I can all take questions at once, or if there are any questions right now, I'm happy to field those as well.
Thank you. We have a couple of questions that are in already. The first is, will work on solitary confinement be for both adults and juveniles?
That's a good question. I think that we have traditionally kind of tried to focus on adult confinement, in part because the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Programs maintains the data collections, most of the data collections related to juveniles, or either they do or NIJ does kind of collaboratively with them. So I would expect that a response to Congress on that would probably need to take it into account both adult and juvenile populations.
Thank you. Another question. Are there any other COVID impact studies planned? We believe there was one, or the questioner believes there was one on domestic violence and one looking at jail population already. But have you heard of any plans or ideas for the next program plan to include COVID impact studies?
We have, I have to say, particularly for the folks in our corrections unit, they did a really nice job of kind of jumping to try to collect data of the impact of COVID on kind of correctional populations. And we shared some of the initial findings on that, both in our jail inmates publication much earlier this year, and our Jails in Indian Country publication in August. Both of those, I think, covered the first 6 months of 2020, kind of that initial drop. And we've been collecting data on kind of the long tail of the correctional populations as a result, changes in correctional populations as a result of COVID. So I think you'll see that come out. And I think that we also did the same thing for probation and parole populations. So we're kind of working through those data. I will say that, it's so tempting I was thinking today, it's so tempting to talk about COVID in the rear view, but it's obviously also very much in front of us. And so it's a fluid situation. And so, trying to kind of keep on top of it and to try to, for not just for us, but for the people who provide us data. This was a big ask of them. And they generally were very helpful, but they face challenges too, because they're in a much more, serious situation than those of us who are just trying to collect the data. And so we appreciate their help, but also, the response rates weren't quite as great as they were early on.
Thanks. Another question, does BJS have any plans to move more toward producing and disseminating more online interactive reports and data dashboards rather than traditional report formats? That N-dash looks very impressive, and I think there was a lot of interest in the data dashboard on sexual assault earlier.
We're very much interested in kind of moving in that direction. It's both helpful to our users, both the casual users and the kind of serious users of our data. And it is definitely, I think, the way of the future. I think what that transition looks like, we haven't quite sorted out the specifics of how we do that, but I think that we're trying very much to catch up to the fact that we're very much in the 21st century and that our publications and our data availability should reflect that.
And I noticed that your video screen is black. Other folks have found that if they turn off the video and back on, that it might come back into focus there. All right, oh, there you are.
I know, it's just me. I'm just one big black screen, so yes.
All right, another question. Given the administration's interest in violence reduction strategies that are jointly developed and implemented with the community, are there specific efforts that SACS or even JRSA could potentially pursue to expand the knowledge base about what works or how to achieve effective implementation in the field with violence reduction?
I think that it's absolutely right, but I'm not sure that we would recommend kind of a specific research strategy. I think that you all know kind of the conditions on the ground and know the kind of data collection and research strategies that work. And I mean, the circumstances are very different across the country. And honestly, the kind of implementation of programs differs from site to site. So I think that kind of using your best judgment about the kind of conditions on the ground and the best research approach is probably your best strategy.
All right, thank you. Another question, does BJS have any involvement in the data reporting related to the death in custody reporting program?
No, almost no.
Okay.
Formally, the answer is that the Death in Custody report, because the Death in Custody Reporting Act of 2013 imposes a potential penalty for JAG funds on states for failure to comply with the requirement, BJS can't be part of that data collection. We don't do data collections. We really, unless we're required by a statute, we don't do data collections that involve penalties. We do data collections that are voluntary. And I say almost for two reasons. The first is that we obviously had existing data collections that we've now completely wound down. We ended mortality in correctional institutions in 2019. And in fact, yesterday just released our last MCI reports. The small caveat is that we do collect data from federal law enforcement agencies as directed by the Attorney General. So that doesn't necessarily affect any of you, but we do maintain relationships with federal law enforcement agencies and put out what should be an annual report on deaths in custody under the, related to federal law enforcement agencies and not to state and locals.
All right, thank you. Okay, that seems to be all the questions we have now, but I'm sure folks will be thinking of additional questions as we turn things over to Devin. I do want to remind people, speaking of N-dash and the National Crime Victimization Survey, I believe BJS is holding a webinar on that next week. So I think folks can register on your website.
Devin is also a black box, it looks like, so I will try again. And we are seeing my screen?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Nice not to see any of you, but I'm happy to say hello. I'm just going to spend a few minutes talking about some updates from the FY21 SJS program, kind of give you the lay of the land from the applications to the awards we made and the projects, high-level overview of the projects we're funding. and then just a brief discussion of what to look for in 2022, and just some resources at the end about for JUST grants. Blink and I'll be done. So in 2021, as you were aware, we posted the solicitation pretty early. We posted it in mid-December of 2020. That was a push from the previous administration to get out solicitations before the end of the year. So that is not anticipated. Do not be looking for a solicitation to come out in a few days' time. The deadline to submit was March 18th of 2021, and we had about $4.8 million available to award. That money comes out of the BJS base funding that funds all of our statistical programs. So the money is not set in stone and can shift from year to year depending on what our total BJS base allowance is and what other program priorities that we have to fund are. So we received 31 applications last year, totaling over $5 million. While we did get a few fewer applications than in previous years, we still got more than we had available to award. Typically, as you can see, we got 34 applications in 2020, and that's more in line with what we would expect. 34 to 36 applications per year, I think, is about what we see. So it was a fewer number last year, and that may be just lingering effects of COVID. Ongoing projects that the SACs had that they just couldn't, put another application together, or quite honestly, some issues with getting the application together and getting it in JUST grants. But we hope to see back up to the normal number in 2022. We made 28 awards last year. This is not a program where we automatically fund every application. It's not competitive in the sense that you're competing against other SACs or against an amount of money. It's really projects and how they fit with the solicitation and the themes and generally in the deliverables being presented. So there were a few applications that fell a bit short, so we did not fund them. And the total funding was about $4.4 million, with a median award of $78,000 and change. And then the average award was $141,000. But that does include awards we made for multi-year funding. There were a handful that we awarded for 2 to 3 years, so it does skew the average a bit. 33 core capacity and 14 special emphasis projects were awarded. And as we've talked about this afternoon, COVID was certainly a big project area, and we're very excited to see the results of these studies. Some of them certainly looked at the crime patterns, looking at incident-based crime data to look at how COVID affected certain crimes. Others looked at policy-making decisions, releases from jails, pretrial release decisions, and court operations in general. So we do look forward to seeing those projects, the deliverables for those projects. And as per usual, we do get a lot of requests for recidivism studies, which is always, those are always good studies, and we look forward to seeing the results of those. They cover the gamut of the usual 3-year follow-up for recidivism, and then some looking at the longer recidivism patterns, 5 to 10 years. Increasing access to statistical data, 10 projects focusing on that, and a lot of dashboards. We're seeing, I think every year we're seeing a couple more SACs asking for funding for dashboard work. And as you can see, BJS is following suit, and I think we're all going to see the benefits of that in years to come, to being able to show the data, market it to the masses in a better way. 9 projects focusing on analyzing incident-based data. And I will say that there's overlap in these. Certainly the incident-based data is also under the COVID projects and some use of the recidivism work as well. And then we had others focusing on data linking across agencies, some juvenile justice studies, firearms, and traffic stops. So overall, I think we saw a lot of good and interesting projects come through for this year. Now in 2022, the solicitation is still being drafted, and as I said, do not expect to see one posting in 12 or 13 days' time. Right now, the project areas and the available amount of funding is expected to be the same or similar to 2021. However, if you are skimming through the 2021 solicitation and you have some ideas or thoughts on topics that you think are glaring omissions from what we have, and you would like to suggest some topics, you know, I certainly, we're open to ideas, but you would have to do it in the next couple weeks, because we will wrap up the draft and get it moving through the process shortly. So, and then the anticipated timing of the release, I'm hopeful for late January, but it may be more like February. And then the deadline for submission is likely to be around mid-April. We will at least give you 60 days for an open period, but we would aim for maybe 75. But there's no stopping planning early for these, so please start working on them now. And then, as I said, just a brief Just Grants update here. We're hoping for a smoother 2022 season. I'm sure many of you experienced some issues with submitting applications, signing off on awards, performance reports, grant adjustments, all sorts of things. They are actively working to make improvements in all areas of Just Grants, and the training available is ongoing. And I highly suggest you all visit the website listed here and take advantage of these weekly Q&A sessions. I think folks have found them very helpful. However, if you don't get the answers that you're looking for, feel free to continue to reach out to Stephanie, Ron, and Terrence, or myself, if you're just not getting what you need from Just Grants. But we will do what we can. And that is all I have, if anybody has any questions.
All right, thank you. We have had one question come in, and that relates to data integration, which you all may recall was a major session at the national conference. The question is, since a number of SACs are currently involved in data integration work involving criminal justice and behavioral health data, and SACs seem well positioned to understand how integration can work and be used in the field, would BJS see value in a joint JRSA and SAC or multi-SAC initiative aimed at developing a handful of use cases in collaboration with one or more organizations doing cutting-edge development work in this space? Whew, long question. How interested are you in data integration work?
The short answer is maybe. I think it's kind of what's the end result, what's the scope of the project. If you're integrating data and the resulting study is something in the criminal justice venue, but you're integrating health data into your criminal justice data I'm not going to think of anything off the top of my head, because clearly I wasn't anticipating that question, but I think everybody can come up with their own examples of that. But I would say yes and no. It kind of depends, which is a great answer from the government.
All right, another question. In the current solicitation, is there an opportunity for program evaluation? Does that fit in the current areas? For example, evaluating a victim services program?
That's a little bit more on the fence. And I will say we have been trying to walk the line between research and statistics at BJS and try to lean more towards the statistics, and evaluation efforts we feel are more in the NIJ kind of work product. That is not to say we haven't funded that kind of work before, but there has been discussions in our office about trying to be more targeted toward the statistical side of our work rather than evaluating certain programs. However, there are programs that potentially are that are funded with OJP funds potentially that BJS may consider using a SAC to evaluate some kind of BJA program, or I know we've done some OVC evaluation, I think, before as well. So again, any of these things that are a bit on the bubble, we strongly say you reach out to JRSA or to BJS or both to have a discussion early in the process to sort of get more than a hypothetical answer from me where I don't have the exact program to discuss or whatever. So yeah, there's not one fine line that says it's not a black and white issue. We definitely can massage these things sometimes, but generally speaking, evaluations aren't at the top of our list.
All right, another question. Given the SAC's strong interest in new modes of data visualization, will BJS value proposals that demonstrate advances in that area?
Yes, if it falls under the increasing access to statistical data, which includes visualization, better ways to visualize the data and get more people to look at it and to understand it, then yeah, I mean, that is certainly something we've continued to fund. But it should be new data. It shouldn't just always be a small enhancement to the website. It really should be something somewhat innovative, but yeah.
All right, thank you. It looks like that's it for the current questions. So I believe we can move on to Stephanie. Stephanie, I'm not hearing you. And I don't know why it doesn't show that you're muted.
Sorry.
There we go.
No, I'm double muted. Sorry. And I pushed the button, but I guess I didn't push it hard enough. Sorry about that. Good afternoon. I am going to cover a couple of areas, or a few areas, for this year's TA program that we feel two are a little bit different from what we've had in the past. And one of the areas is something that we've had in the past, but we just want to make sure that you as the SACs know that this is out there and for you to be able to use it. The first area I'm going to talk about is the application review. This is going to be a new requirement for all SACs that are requesting funds from the FY22 program that Devin just mentioned. We're asking for you to submit to JRSA prior to you uploading your application into Just Grants. Submitting to JRSA a draft of your application at least 4 to 6 weeks before the application is actually due, and that's the Just Grants deadline, into OJP system for you to submit it to JRSA for review and comment. This is going to help in those areas where some SACs may be lacking a little bit with developing a clear and concise topic areas. It's just going to help you to develop those even more. And we want that to be 4 to 6 weeks before, because that's going to allow you enough time to receive that feedback from JRSA, to make any changes, and to submit it into Just Grants prior to the deadline. And we're hoping this helps some of the ones that may straggle behind a little bit with submitting your applications by the deadline, because Just Grants is a new system. Last year we had some issues with getting things uploaded into the system. So knowing that you'll have JRSA to review your applications, to give you that additional time to make those changes, and also give you that additional time needed to have it submitted into Just Grants. This does not prevent you from actually reaching out to the program managers, myself, Ron, and Terrence, if you want to run an idea by us. That does not prevent that from happening. But we do ask that we are requiring, and it will be a special condition on the award, require you to be able to submit that application to JRSA for review. The second area I want to cover talks about editorial review and assistance. And as a requirement to receiving an award from BJS, from the SAC program, you are required to provide us with deliverables. Those are final reports, evaluations, website enhancements, anything as such. We are asking for you to, once you get those things written and developed, to actually run them through JRSA again, as the TA provider, that's what they're there for, is to give you feedback and editorial assistance with some of these reports that are being submitted. As we heard earlier, there were several great reports that came out of DC as well as Utah and Illinois that I'm sure that they probably were able to run their reports through JRSA to have them to vet them, and then produced a great report that eventually was awarded with the Doug Yearwood Award. So we're wanting to see more people, more of our SACs get that opportunity to submit these great reports for these awards. And that can be done by simply submitting what you have to JRSA, getting their feedback, and actually updating your reports as such. The last area that I want to cover is site visits. This is a new area for us, as JRSA will be conducting site visits for at least up to, we're asking them to conduct 4 a quarter throughout the lifetime of this award, which this award is from January 1, 2022 through 12/31/2022. And we're asking them to reach out to the SACs to conduct site visits with the SACs. Now, these are not going to be like the site visits that we do as BJS program managers with you all, which are very in-depth and can be intense sometimes. But these are more on the lines of a desk review, whereas JRSA will be reaching out to you to find out from you if you had any impediments in trying to get your research project off the ground. What are things that you felt that your SAC does well, and what are some things that you struggle with? Is it some things like, you guys can do great research, but you struggle and have problems with disseminating that information? This is where JRSA will be able to, help pinpoint those areas and then help provide solutions to help you enhance your program areas. Also, they can be helpful with strategic planning, gap analysis, things such as that. So it's very important that when JRSA reaches out to you, or if you feel that you are requiring a site visit to help you along the way, especially if you're a new SAC and not quite sure where you're going, or if you have a SAC that has been around for years, but now you're struggling with finding some good projects to do, this is the time to reach out to JRSA to set up one of those site visits with them so that they can come out. Well, we would love for them to be in person right now, but they're going to be virtually for the time being until we open back up again. So just reaching out to them to let them know that you're interested in a site visit, that would be a great way to go as well. I think that's about it that I have. I think JRSA probably will cover this even more in depth in their upcoming session and send out more information as they develop these areas for the application reviews and the site visits. So Susan, that's all I have.
All right, thank you. Folks, I want to remind you that you can put your questions in the question box. One question has come in that I don't know is for you, Stephanie, or Devin. That's, do you anticipate the same award maximums of $75,000 for core capacity and $150,000 for special emphasis projects?
I believe that we're going to keep it the same, but Devin, you can definitely pitch in.
Yes. Yes, the amount that we have available right now is going to be the same. The overall amount we have available, and we are anticipating the individual amounts, the 75 and the 150, will be the same.
All right. I'm not seeing any other questions come in. So are there any final thoughts? Has anyone thought of something that you forgot to include in your presentation?
Susan, there was one thing in the chat that I would just address from Christy Love
Okay.
about the review requirement being tough to be able, because it does kind of eat into to the time the SAC has to prepare their SJS application. I was just under the impression that we weren't looking for, I wasn't thinking we were looking for the complete final application product. I think a project plan, a draft of the projects, you know, a general idea of the projects and where they were going and what the deliverables were, would satisfy what we're looking for. It's not the finished product. Everything does not need to be done to be submitted for review. It's really just to get a sense of what the SAC is proposing to do. And if it seems to be a bit off track, or if there seems to be some glaring holes, that's when we would try to address those. So it should be something that we would like to look at earlier rather than later. So I don't know if that's helpful or not, but I think the objective was that, not to try to get a peer review of the application right before they submit it of it.
Great, thanks. And I would echo that JRSA will be working closely with BJS to make sure that this process is workable, meets the objectives of BJS, but also doesn't derail the proposal process for the applicants.
And I just want to remind them that they do have, as Devin mentioned earlier, 60 days to complete an application. So we're not looking for something that, you know, which is with a 30-day turnaround period. It is 60 days, which is quite a long time to be able to develop I know some people have already started working on the application from last year, just with an idea that they have, knowing that, you know, that the SAC program doesn't change much from year to year. We may add a new subject here or there based on feedback that we receive from the SAC. But other than that, it's typically, you know, a very similar solicitation that goes out every year.
All right, that looks like that's the end of all of the questions. I want to thank all of you for giving your time to address the audience today. I know that we have a lot of valuable takeaways from what you shared with us today. I am disappointed there won't be a BJS TikTok, Kevin.
Yeah.
But we look forward to the Facebook page and the revived Twitter. Oh, one other question has come in. Would you consider doing a Just Grants webinar for SACs focused on SJS grant submissions?
Oh, no, absolutely not. I think yes, we would consider it, but I think the problem is trying to get somebody maybe from the Just Grant side of the house to be able to participate in that, because they are doing all these other training sessions and such. And so I think we could do what we could from our perspective, but we may not be able to fully address what, you know, or fully cover what a webinar on Just Grants should cover.
We tried last year, so it wasn't that we didn't try for you. We did, and we were given some slides that I don't know, they may still be helpful for you this year, but we may have to have them to revamp them just a little bit based on updates that have been done. We can certainly look into that.
Right, I remember that, Stephanie. You and I worked hard in the hopes that we could get a special Just Grants training, but the Just Grants staff was they had far too many fires to put out, too many grantees that needed assistance to do a special webinar for us. But as you all mentioned, they have those weekly training sessions and that are valuable. So I do encourage.
And I think they're always updating the training materials too. I think they're doing a refresh of the training materials, and they do try to put new documents up on the Just Grants website periodically. So I would just continue to check to see what's available up there. And they will do some push emails out to all the grantees too, telling folks when there's new stuff on the website as well, I believe. So.
Okay. Yeah, the questioner, the person who raised that question is noting that some of the SACs in particular only use Just Grants for SJS, so they're not as familiar with the system as some people who may have multiple grants in Just Grants.
Stephanie is happy to help every single one of them. So if you just reach out to her directly.
I feel that I've already done that. So seriously, if you have any questions that, and as Devin mentioned earlier, if you feel that you're not really getting an answer in a timely manner, because they do have so many questions that are being funneled through that they're trying to troubleshoot. If it is something that you truly think that we can do as program managers, certainly feel free to reach out to me. I'm putting Ron and Terrence on the map as well. Reach out to them, but we'll be more than happy to try to help you if you've gotten to that point where you just feel that you're not getting the answer in a timely manner, or just, it is something you really need to put out a fire right away. We can see if we can try to help you.
All right, thank you. Thanks again for joining us today. This has been really informative. All right, folks, we're running a few minutes ahead, but I'm going to ask Jason to post the break slide for 5 minutes. When you come back, we're going to hear from JRSA's Executive Director about new directions for JRSA. So please do join us. All right, welcome back, everyone. As promised, we have a very exciting final session for you. Jeff Sedgwick is going to join us and share some of the new visioning, new plans, all the thought that's going into a new direction for JRSA. So Jeff, I will cede the floor to you. And I can't hear you.
Okay, great.
There we go.
How's that?
Perfect, thank you.
All right, folks, I am, let me preface this presentation with just a couple of comments about why JRSA undertook this activity of doing a rebranding or considering doing a rebranding. Something that the organization has really not done in quite a while. We did back in 2015 write a strategic plan for the organization, which we've been operating under since. But in thinking about and going back through some of the records for JRSA, the last time I can see anything that looked like a rebranding was way back when JRSA became JRSA. Before that, it had been birthed and existed as the Criminal Justice Statistics Association. So you might want to begin by thinking, about what was signified in that shift in name from the Criminal Justice Statistics Association to the Justice Research and Statistics Association. So we're in many respects in the middle of a similar journey of thinking through not so much what we've been or what we are, but what we would like to be, that would be of service to the community and give us an opportunity to kind of shift some resources, shift the way we think about things, shift the way we talk about ourselves, both among ourselves as members, but also to the larger community that in many cases we would like to have as members. So that's a little bit of background on the rebranding, and what I'm going to do is go through this slide deck, which, as you can tell, is pretty large, and please feel free. Susan, I'm going to need your help on this because I'm going to be focused on the slides and the screen itself, so I won't be able to watch the chat. But if there's along the way, if you have a question, either put it in the chat or put your hand up, and I'll be happy to call on you, and we'll see where the conversation takes us. So everybody get ready. Here we go. We've got 74 slides to go through, but I promise it will not take the rest of your life. It will maybe even take the rest of the next 45 minutes. Okay, so basically, this is just kind of the introduction, the way a rebranding proposal unfolds. You generally point to the context in which the organization operates. You think about the protagonist. You think about what the conflict is. You think about the resolution of that conflict, which the rebranding is meant to achieve. And then there is the unveiling of some choices to be made as we take this journey. And again, what the stress to be here, part of what's going on here is going to be a vision, and then part of it is going to be a step-by-step how we do that, how we go from where we are to where we want to be. Okay, so let's dig in. First off, I got to show you this picture. We will come back to it a little bit later. You'll see it again in this slide deck. I particularly liked this choice after I got to the end of the slide deck. I was intrigued by it at the beginning. Why this particular thing with chemistry and lab equipment was the opening to a presentation about a criminal justice research organization and community. But I think by the end, you'll understand why this was put right at the very beginning. So a little teaser for where we're going. Okay, so our context. Most of this is not going to be very surprising to you. The trend is in the United States has significantly lower crime rates than it had in the early 1990s. So as you look across these different charts, you can see whether it's violent crimes from the FBI, whether it's violent victimizations from the NCVS and BJS, whether they're property crimes or property victimizations, as mentioned, as recorded by either the FBI or the BJS. We live in a much safer world at the time this report was written, which was 2020, than we lived in earlier in the 1990s. You can all remember what Franklin Zimring characterized as the Great American Crime Decline. Interestingly enough, though, misperceptions abound, because surveys consistently show that Americans think that there is more crime nationally each year than there was the year before. They perceive the crime rate to be going up, even though in reality we know it's going down, or it has been until the past couple of years. So again, the Gallup has shown that the gap between the share of Americans who say crime is up nationally and the share who say it's up locally is extraordinarily divergent. People think their neighborhood is safe, but they think the nation is quite unsafe. What are the top issues in criminal justice today that people think about, asking questions about, want to know more about? Violent crime in urban areas, cybercrime, addiction epidemics, mass incarceration, and homeland security are the leading issues that are driving the media and driving discourse on criminal justice in the United States as we speak. That conversation about those issues is taking place in a country that is considerably more polarized than it used to be. As a political scientist, I love this diagram because I talk about this all the time, or did when I was teaching my students, that the overlap between the two parties in the United States, which was significant in 1994, there was a considerable overlap between the liberal wing of the Republican Party and the conservative wing of the Democratic Party. That overlap has shrunk extraordinarily over the time period we're looking at. The result is what you hear from politicians, what you tend to hear in the media, is much more polarized than it used to be. And it's worth thinking about that. We sense that we live in a nation that is quite divided and quite polarized. Many of you may have heard about or even read a book that got a lot of press several years ago called The Big Sort. That was written by a couple of demographers who were looking at the propensity of Americans to move. And Americans do move quite frequently. We are a very mobile people. We relocate much more frequently than people do in many other countries. And what these demographers found was that increasingly people are choosing to move to communities where they are surrounded by people who think like they do. And they were pointing out the danger of that in the sense that you can now choose to live in a bubble of people who essentially think the way you do. And as a result, the discourse is largely an echo of your own voice. And it's worth thinking about what that means. Certainly the headline here on the rebranding is that causes a crisis of trust. If you only live with people who agree with you, it's very easy to develop a profound sense of distrust in others, wherever they live. So what we do as people who study an important issue, public order, criminal justice, juvenile justice and adult justice and so on, we're trying to do our work in an increasingly polarized environment. And that raises some profound challenges, but I think as you'll see, it offers some opportunities as well. Clearly the sense among an awful lot of Americans is that polarization is getting worse. It's getting easier and easier to imagine bad things about people who disagree with you. It's getting easier to imagine that the other party is full of bad people or people with evil motives, or they're not like us. They're not my fellow citizen. Again, this is an environment, the context in which we do our work, and it presents profound challenges for us, as I'm sure you all know. Oh, let me go back to this one. One of the things on here that really stunned me when I read this the first time. Look at these last two bullet points. That's pretty shocking. You know, people would be unhappy if their child decided to marry someone who aligned with the other political party. I mean, that's actually pretty bizarre. At least to me, I don't know. But of course, I grew up in a household where my mother was the daughter of a family that were ethnic Democratic city politicians. And my father grew up in a family where his father was a assistant U.S. attorney in the Eastern District of Ohio. And I think all of us would characterize my father as a paleo-conservative. You know, he was out there with Barry Goldwater in 1964. Never occurred to me that, you know, people that disagreed politically couldn't be friends or couldn't even be married to each other. Now, how do these perceptions of the other being untrustworthy, being evil, how does that affect action, right? Well, this slide says, you know, to the extent that those misperceptions influence action, it can lead to some pretty harsh policies, some pretty ethically questionable practices. It can lead to a ready resort to violence against somebody that you disagree with because they're not quite entitled to the same rights of safety and personal autonomy that you're entitled to. So, you know, this is serious stuff. This doesn't play out, as we all know from the past couple of years, this doesn't play out just at the level of thoughts and ideas. It plays out in the way we act toward each other in public and the way we treat each other in public. So the stakes are high. Think about that polarization and how it impacts criminal justice. How does it affect how we think about judicial selection? How does it how does it impact the way we talk about or report judicial decisions on issues? How often have you heard, particularly currently, the court described as, oh, well, the liberal members of the court or the conservative members of the court, you know, we already know how they're going to decide this case. You know, their arguments or their thinking are unimportant. We've already put them in a box where we know how they're going to behave and we're going to judge them accordingly. Similarly, polarization impacts our understanding of separation of powers unless one party controls all three branches. And then we kind of breathe a heavy sigh of relief and say, wow, we got to get all we can get while our party controls all three branches, because man, if the other party gets one of the three branches, if they get the presidency, the House, or the Senate, all possibility of us getting what we want disappears. That just raises the stakes in political elections. So how did we get here? A few key factors. There's lots. I mean, there's a whole literature on what's happened to the United States. You know, this literature, you could find it going back to the 1960s in books that had titles like The Unraveling of America. There's been a vibrant literature on, you know, how deep and how polarized is the United States. Is the polarization only at the political or at the elite level, or is it down at the working class level, common people, that, you know, we can't get along with people that are not just like us? Is that a elite behavior problem, or is that reach through all levels of the community? So political activism, the rise of single issue politics has certainly fed into this polarization. Election policies, campaign finance reform that allows political activists to donate large amounts of money to candidates in order to make sure their team wins. So elections have played into this. In-group bias, cognitive biases like confirmation bias, where you tend to seek out information that reinforces your current beliefs, kind of, you know, becomes a cycle that feeds on itself. The media has always had an attitude that if it bleeds, it leads, right? That's always been a slogan about journalism. But one of the things we could talk about with the media is the changing economics of the media. And particularly, I think we all know that there's a disappearance of local newspapers. The newspaper industry is in terrible shape. The number of papers that have closed, gone bankrupt, you know, is staggering. Scratch your head for a minute and say, how did that happen? Why all of a sudden did newspapers go bankrupt? Answer: newspapers were, you know, news was never a money-making proposition. Many newspapers supported themselves on classified ads. When's the last time you read a classified ad in a newspaper? You now go to Craigslist online, or you go to social media, or you go to eBay or some other platform, Etsy or whatever. All of a sudden, newspapers lost a principal source of their revenue. And now the ones that are surviving largely online in digital form. And think about that for a second. In the old days with a paper media, there were 2 editions a day. If you were a reporter, you had 8 hours to chase down a story and make sure that it was true and that you could support it, and you had people on the record that you could quote endorsing that, your particular story, and saying, yes, that's factual. If you're digital, you only get the clicks and the advertising revenue that comes from being online if you're the first one out with the story. So quite frankly, you don't have time to check things out. You don't have time to get people on record. So all of a sudden, if you notice, oh, there's a lot of information on the media, in the media now, but it's anonymously sourced. Oh, can you trust it? And social media bubbles. I think a lot of us realize, you know, somewhere along the line, when social media emerged, we thought it was going to be a wonderful device for staying in touch with people, building your community, having an expansive community that you could stay in touch with quite easily. Certainly, I bought into that. But then all of a sudden you start realizing actually what's going on social media is very often people are choosing to live in a bubble, just like the big sort in residential location. They're now choosing to befriend people who think the way they do. So in many ways, social media is feeding the polarization. The good news is the vast majority of Americans say they're tired of it. They are uncomfortable with how divided we have become. And they're looking for ways to get their information from a trustworthy source that is not going to polarize them. It's not going to put them in a bucket and feed them information that reinforces their biases or their inclinations. So how do we stop the trend? What are some things that we could do to actually improve the climate generally in the United States, regardless of what issue we're talking about? But in our case, we're going to be particularly interested in talking about criminal and juvenile justice, public safety, community wellness, right? What can we do? What can we contribute? One thing we can do is work with journalists, how to cover stories responsibly, right? Give them good information and help them interpret it. We can cut down on implicit and explicit bias. We can provide alternate sources for news from social media. Give people access to information that's information and not a narrative that's designed to persuade. And also seek out other points of view, right? Show that complex social issues, there's multiple ways of looking at them, and you'll learn something from each of those perspectives. That's the context that JRSA exists in. That's the context you as members of JRSA exist in. You're in the business of trying to understand and convey to the public in all its varieties, whether it's other researchers, whether it's research consumers, whether it's policymakers, whether it's journalists, whether it's concerned citizens, whether it's your fellow practitioners in the criminal justice system. We're operating in an environment where all of those forces that we've just talked about in terms of polarization and desire for objective information as opposed to advocacy, that's where we are. Now, how do we deal with that? Okay, how do we survive in this environment and in fact push back against some of the really dangerous trends that have polarized us in the community? One thing is, and I really like this particular slide when I saw it the first time, we tend to think very much more easily about research producers than we do about research consumers. We enjoy hanging out with other people who do what we do: collect data, find data, structure analyses, do research, write up research reports. We like hanging out with those folks. We go to their conferences. We sometimes can be, and JRSA is this way, as you'll see by the end of this. We don't very often think enough about the research consumers. Who needs to know what we're doing? Who needs to know the fruits of our research? We should be thinking more about that because we don't collect data and do research just for the fun of it. We want to see it used. We want to see it make the world a better place, right? So we do need to think about how we take the research that we produce and find a way to get it into the hands of people who want that research because they want to live in a better community and they need some help in terms of What are good choices that can be made when they're offered different policies? Public safety, policing, prosecution, corrections, whatever. How do they know which to choose? Because there's lots of choices out there. What can we do to help them? Interestingly enough, nice slide. We don't have time to go through every sentence in here, but one of the really intriguing things here is if you look at the kind of mindset and who the research producers are and who the research consumers are, they are not the same group, and they will look to JRSA for slightly different things, right? But they overlap, right? And we kind of live in that overlap between the research producers and the research consumers. So here's a whole set of characteristics about what researchers or research producers are like and why they might come to JRSA. And then here's a similar set of characteristics for research consumers. Their demographics, their mindset, kind of the things that give them pause, their behaviors, their beliefs, their needs, their desires, reasons they might come to JRSA. And again, I think this is a group that we haven't historically at JRSA paid enough attention to. The folks who use our research. So we're good at producing it. We're not quite as good as and spending enough time thinking about how to get what we produce, which has value, into the hands of practitioners and policymakers and journalists so that they can do their work better and improve and amplify what we do and make the world a better place. Okay, conflict. What are the principal challenges that our audience is facing, and who are our competitors in trying to help our audience resolve those conflicts? What's our competition? And what's our audience, what is the thing we should be aiming to provide to improve conditions for our audience, whether they're research producers or research consumers? All right, nice word cloud. I love this one. Everything in the kind of gold color, those are positives. Okay, so these are the things that bring people to be research producers and keep them in that line of work. Okay, again, with word clouds, the larger the text, the more important that particular characteristic is. The things in black are the things that are negatives. By the way, I doubt if anybody watching this would disagree with this one. The biggest problem for research producers is getting the data, but then enough time to do the work, the training and retraining, the visibility for the work we do. We don't own any of the data, right? How about for research consumers? Interestingly enough, a different person kind of summarized the opinions of research consumers, so we didn't get a word cloud, but again, data challenges. Big problem. Getting access to data. Everybody defines things in different ways. Data is inconsistent or incomplete. Not all agencies share. There's a lack of a central repository, yada, 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 okay? So both groups have things that draw them to research, and both groups have things where they say, you know what, this is really hard. This is difficult. This is more difficult than we thought it was going to be. In fact, one of the interesting things is both groups will agree that what they do, they feel like they've run half a marathon before they even get started, just to get access to the data, just to find the right research. It makes what they want to do and what they want to achieve much more difficult than they thought it would be and should be. So what both groups are looking for is right here. They want credible research and resources to help them achieve more, right? They're looking for someone and some organization that can help empower them. Now, this is kind of a fun, there's multiple ways of looking at the next several slides. A couple things I'll tip you off for. They've come up with some categories and they've dropped organizations into those categories. Many of these you could quarrel with if you wanted to, you can quibble with them, okay? But a couple things to pay attention to. Notice the visual presentation for them, for these different organizations. Notice their use of graphics and text, right? Notice their color palette. Okay. These are many of those same organizations you just saw with their logos and their, kind of the way they present themselves, their icons and so on. Here, they're looking at how they describe themselves. What do you notice here? One thing is, a lot of these descriptions are pretty wordy. This is a environment that we exist in as JRSA, of people who use a lot of words, right? And the other thing you might notice, and let me go back a slide. Do you notice here that the dominant color is blue? Again, there's a lot of blue here, right? By the way, in politics, what's a blue state? Oh, here's another one. More category communication conventions. More blue. What's blue signify in politics? If you're a blue state, you're a democratic state. Okay? Think back to polarization. More blue. Lots of words. Okay, so we understand what the context is, kind of understand now what the competition is, and there's a lot of organizations that you just looked at on those slides that are our competitors in addressing the information needs of both research consumers and research producers. So how do we carve out a niche? How do we rebrand ourselves? How do we, which direction do we go in order to find a spot where we're addressing a shared need and we can offer something that very few other organizations can offer? And what is that thing? And how do you package it? How do you present it? How do you explain it? How do you talk about it to yourself, to your members, and to the outside public? That's what resolution's about. Competency. Try this one on. Read through this. What do you think? Does this sound like us? I think I'm very comfortable with this. I think this is a good thing for us to say, yep, this is what we're competent at, and that we every day remind ourselves about this and we work to get better and better at it. Note some things in here. It's a resource center for researchers, analysts, journalists, and practitioners. Reputable, nonpartisan research. Learning programs tailored for justice researchers and research consumers, and opportunities for peers to meet, share perspectives, and learn from one another. We also conduct justice research, comprehensive analyses of crucial issues and their effects across the entire justice system. I kind of like this. So what, based on that competency statement, would we say our brand attributes are? What is the JRSA brand? This proposal is we define ourselves in terms of 3 pillars. One is we do research. Second is that we provide learning opportunities, right? So we provide opportunities for our members to become better at what they do. And we provide a community, an opportunity to hang out with like-minded professionals that share the same values and commitments. Because quite frankly, we are an association, which means, you know, it's a constant reminder, we like to associate with one another. It's intrinsically enjoyable to be able to do peer-to-peer learning and hang out with people who are facing the same challenges you are, right? So you can see where this is headed. Think about JRSA in terms of the research that you and your members do, the learning opportunities, and the sense of community that you can create. Proof points. Now, proof point I was unfamiliar with, but this is getting back to the question, if you're going to say in this highly polarized environment that we're in, that JRSA informs but does not advocate, and, you know, we are nonpartisan, we are objective, we do high quality research, we have a canon of ethics that we abide by. How would you prove that to somebody who says, easy to say, prove it to me? Prove it to me. Here's some things we could say, right? We do have a code of ethics. Our research is funded by the federal grants, not by foundations. Interestingly enough, when we went out and when we had the rebranding proposal done, one of the focus groups, there were 3 different focus groups that were involved in developing this plan. One was current members of JRSA. And the question for them is, what brought you to join JRSA? So what were you looking for when you joined? And then what more could JRSA offer you that you would put a high value on and cement your relationship with JRSA? That was group 1. Group 2 was people who had been members of JRSA, but who had let their membership lapse. And there the interview questions were rather different. It was, okay, you joined JRSA at one point in time looking for something. Clearly JRSA didn't provide it, and so you dropped your membership. What was it you were looking for and were disappointed that JRSA couldn't provide it? And then the third group was people who had never joined JRSA, but they were in a very similar line of work as most of our members. That is, they were people who dealt with criminal and juvenile justice data and research and dissemination of information. And the question there was, well, gee, what do you know about JRSA? Why have you never joined? And what is it that you're looking for in your professional life and your professional development that if JRSA offered it, you'd consider joining? One of the most interesting things in that set of interviews was when people were introduced to JRSA, they said, where's their money coming from? Because their suspicion was, there's a lot of organizations out there that say we provide information, but to use kind of harsh language, they're fronts for a foundation or a donor who has a cause. And so they're in the business of advocacy. And people are skeptical because they know they live in a partisan world, right? So establishing that you are objective, nonpartisan, you're not on the take, you're not masquerading as information when you're really an advocacy organization is important to do. So this is a list of some of the things that we came up with that we can say, or in one case could say, this one here. If we can say these with a straight face and mean it and not be caught cutting corners, okay, we can actually establish to people's satisfaction our independence. Let me give you one other insight that came out of that set of interviews that was the most disappointing thing I've ever heard. These are for the group of people who had never joined JRSA. We said to them, well, here's what JRSA is, and we're describing it to them. And one person's reaction was, well, gee, I've heard of the state statistical analysis centers, and I have very, very high respect and regard for the work that they do. But I've never even heard of JRSA. Wow, shame on us. Yeah, we're not telling our story. We're doing good work, but if you don't communicate and disseminate, to pick up a theme from yesterday, folks, all the good work you do isn't going to have any impact. So it's kind of like, yeah, we need to really up our game when it comes to communicating who we are and who our members are and what we do and why it's important, why it will help empower you out there, whether you're a journalist, a policymaker, a practitioner, another researcher, a concerned citizen, a student of criminology, a professor of criminology. We can help you be better at what you do. That kind of gets to thinking about JRSA on two levels. There are emotional benefits that we can offer to our members. We can empower them. And then there are functional benefits. We can provide them access to resources that they can't easily get somewhere else, or they can get it more conveniently from us, or the resource is more tailored to the work that our members do than other online learning opportunities that are out there. So we need to be thinking about, as we reposition JRSA, to attract more members, to do more good, to help influence the criminal justice system in the United States to be better, right? We need to be thinking of both on an emotional level and on a functional level. We need to be thinking about, we make our members better at what they want to do, what they have chosen for their profession. And we do it through some functional benefits. Okay. Again, for an organization like JRSA, and we operate, you just saw all the other organizations that are our competitors. We're in a fiercely competitive environment, right? There's lots of people in our space, right, competing with us. So one of the things that, a rebranding specialist gets you thinking about is, what do your customers want? What do your competitors have as their strengths? What do you have as your strengths? And this area right here in the middle, that's where you want to rebrand yourself to land, where you have a strength that answers a customer's desire that none of your competitors have, or don't have it as strong as you do. They're not as good at it as you are, right? That's what will make you successful. All right, so what is unique about JRSA? That we're a nonpartisan, reputable, and comprehensive research organization that explores today's criminal justice issues across the whole justice spectrum. Because of our members and our tie to the SACs and our tie to BJS, we're in an extraordinary position where our members, our partners, cover the entire scope of the criminal justice system, from victimization at one end to post-release integration, re-entry into society on the other, and everything in between. And we have access to and report on all levels of the criminal justice system: local, state, federal. That's pretty unique. There aren't a lot of organizations that can say that their vision and their scope of work covers all levels in a federal system and the entire criminal justice system from the front end to the back end. There's not a lot of organizations like that. Most are much more highly specialized. What can we promise to people? To deliver the highest standards of ethical, nonpartisan, and comprehensive research and resources to the justice research community. Yeah, I'm willing to promise that. Sounds good to me. I like a purpose in life. How about the mission? What do we want to be when we succeed? When we finish this journey, what do we want to be? We want to be the go-to resource for justice researchers, analysts, journalists, and practitioners. Notice the broadening of scope. And we want to enable them to make the impact they want to make. We want to empower them. Note something. What I really like about that last part of the sentence is it says to us as staff at JRSA, we need to be committed to the success and growth of our members, not just of JRSA as an organization with a budget, right, and a staff. We need to be committed to making our members able to be more impactful in their communities as they do their work. Interesting shift in perspective, right? Pay attention to your members. Help them grow in the ways they want to grow. What's our vision? We provide the research and resources to create a more equitable world. Who doesn't want a better world? Who doesn't want a more equitable world? Right? So let's have some aspiration, right? Swing for the fences. So what are our brand values? We're nonpartisan. We have very high standard for integrity and ethics. We provide resources for equitable outcomes to flourish. And we bring the justice research world together to learn and grow from each other. Again, number 4, the community. People want to be in a community of similarly minded professionals sharing a cause to make the world a better place. So what's our archetype? I'll skip through some of this. Archetype is kind of like, what's the representative kind of, if you had to pick a character, a bundle of characteristics, which one would you pick that would be most like you, right? Or you want to be, okay? Does anybody remember that first slide with Madame Curie? What's Madame Curie represent? Research, inquiry. She's a sage. She's wise. She's got a lot of knowledge. She's also female. What do you think of associated with female? Caring, nurturing, right? Interesting. So, you kind of see where this is going in terms of why that slide was at the beginning where it was. Yeah, we care about our members. We care about our communities. We want to make the world a better place. We do research. We do have knowledge. If we apply it well, if we disseminate it well, we are sages, or can be. So here she is again. But I love this sentence here. The sage is a lifelong learner who's always discovering new pieces to fit into the whole. Doesn't that sound a little bit like your aspiration for yourself in your own career? To be a lifelong learner? And what you enjoy about what you do is that you're always discovering new pieces that fit into the complex picture and seeing opportunities to leverage those new pieces to make outcomes better, right? Our branding consultant picked out, said, if you want to look, if you want a good example of somebody that she thought was quite effective in terms of presenting themselves as a sage, she said, of all the organizations that I looked at, and remember, there were a lot of them on those earlier slides, she said, I would probably pick RAND. And she picked out some of the reasons why. RAND has its own graduate school. It's into education in a serious sort of way. They emphasize the degrees that their research staff has, right? They look at the number of staff that they have, the number of countries they work in, the number of languages their staff speak, the percentage of their staff that hold doctorates. By the way, JRSA has a higher percentage of doctorates on its staff than RAND does. Yay, JRSA. Look at all the disciplines they cover. So she's saying, okay, here's now this, look at this. This is a good example of an organization that has established a persona as being a sage. And not just, a sage sitting back in an armchair with a pipe and a nice drink, but somebody who's out in the world working, right? Part of the branding is, what's your tone? Remember all those earlier descriptions of different organizations, and I pointed out to you how wordy they are? She's saying, boy, you want to keep it really simple. Think of your tone as, don't use big words, don't use complex sentences, be brief, be direct, be powerful. Use simple language. What's your imagery? You're approachable. You're warm. You're helpful. You're explanatory. You're a place where people come to get their questions answered. All right, so this is kind of the overall kind of brand DNA, right? Again, research, learning, community, the three pillars, the emotional benefits, the functional benefits. Our archetype is the sage, and the brand idea is we're the go-to resource for the justice research community. I'll skip over this, but this is the fun part, and thank you for all being so patient. This is the fun part, and this is almost like a game, and you can help us with this because we're still playing with this. In rebranding, you very often decide to change the name of the organization, right? Just as JRSA did once before when it became JRSA instead of the Criminal Justice Statistics Association. In picking a name, she said, you want it to be descriptive, right? And so people must know from the name what sector you're from, what's your expertise, and what do you offer. There has to be some scope involved in it besides just it's an association, right? It's just a gathering of people. It's got to have some expertise, some offerings. It's got to aim at a particular sector and so on. And it's also important that, it be a decent acronym. We all know cases of organizations that have picked an acronym that you look at it and you went, oh no, did you not look at that before you adopted that? Yikes. Okay, so here's some options. You are entitled to use the chat box to cast your votes if you want to. This is not an election, but feedback is a good thing. We kind of like to hear what you think about what you're seeing. Here's an alternative. This one I claim credit for, or actually I can claim blame for. I looked at this one and I said, I got to tell you, I see the word training and I think of what you do with a dog. I don't think of training as what you do with people. People, you provide learning opportunities. So just, matter of personal taste, but this got stuck in as one alternative because I objected to I didn't like training particularly. But again, notice something. It's a Center for Justice, Research, and Learning, or Justice, Research, and Training. So it's like we do research. We also provide opportunity for people to grow their own skills. How about this one? The Justice Information Resource Network. Or the Justice Knowledge Network. Okay, well, there's 3 different naming options, get you thinking about it. Here's some feedback. And by the way, there's no sense, I'm not going to pause long enough for you to read all these slides, but if you're interested, drop me an email. I'll be happy to send you this slide deck and you can go through it at your leisure and read some of the comments because it's really interesting. This was a group of non-members and people who had never been members, and they were drawn from a variety of different backgrounds, both research consumers and research producers. So there were some people who worked as Hill staff in Congress. There were people who were working in other think tanks and so on. So you get a variety of reactions to names and so on from a group of people who are what we would call prospective members. So you get what they thought, which one they would pick. Now let's go for a new tagline. And by the way, this is time for a good quiz. How many of you know JRSA's current tagline? Since I don't have my screen up, is anybody saying they know?
I'm not seeing any hands raised or comments in the question box.
All right. Actually, JRSA currently has a tagline, and it's, Jason may have to help me on this one. Analysts turning data into state analysts turning data into policy. That's our current tagline. If you look at it at our homepage, it says Justice Research and Statistics Association. Right next to it on the banner, it says state analysts turning data into policy. Okay. Here's, if you take those 4 options for a name, and now you look at the acronym, and you look at the name under the acronym, and then you look at the tagline, this is what, here's 4 choices. We don't have to choose one of these 4, but it's a way of kind of playing with and showing alternatives and getting you thinking about, which one of those do I like more and why? Okay, so that's one set. Now here's another tagline. Resources for a more equitable world. Now let's put that tagline with the names. Which would you pick? Again, this is part of the branding. Do you want to pick a new name? Do you want to pick a new tagline? Do you want a new acronym? All right, we're getting close to the end. Visual identity. Literally, how do you want the organization to look? Okay. Now, there's some questions you'd want to consider as you think about this visual identity. Again, look at the category convention. Here are a number of organizations that are in the similar space as JRSA. Lots of letters, lots of blue. Vera stands out for being red. But people tend to be blue, or there's black over here with investigative reporters and editors, right? A lot of blue. Which in some respects is not surprising. I mean, for a lot of people, if you think blue in a criminal justice context, what do you think of? Police. Yeah. Law enforcement. Oh, okay. If we're talking criminal justice, blue. But it also has, go back to the beginning of the slide deck, it fits into, subliminally, you're kind of saying, blue, yeah, oh, I guess these guys, lean toward the Democrats. Again, these are all the kind of visual representations of organizations that we partner with, we interact with, they're in the same space we are. So it's kind of like, do you want to fit into this group? Do you want to kind of, just adopt blue and, or do you want to stand out? Do you want to put yourself visually out there as standing very distinctly? Color means something. So when you rebrand and you pick your color palette, you are conveying information by what you choose. You don't just say, well, I like purple, or I'm fond of blue and green. But that's not the way you pick a color palette for an organization. You think, what are you trying to send as a message? Red tends to be associated with, and there's a psychology to color. Red tends to be associated with passion, active, bold, energy, pioneering, leadership, powerful, right? Blue tends to be identified with intelligence, trustworthiness, maturity. It's modern, ambitious, okay? Of course, red and blue also have meanings in politics. Red states are Republican states, blue states are Democratic states. But if you put red and blue together, what would you get? Purple. How many times have you been in a conversation and you said, well, that question's not black and white. It's not either or. And it's, that's complex, and there's aspects of it that are on one side and aspect, it's kind of gray, but the shade of gray is important to think about. So as we think about a color palette for the organization and the website and so on, you do send messages wittingly or unwittingly by your choice of color, something you think about with a rebranding. So here, we're getting close to the end, and this is one of my favorite parts because I love to get the reaction that people have when they see this. Okay, so one color palette and mood board would make gray the dominant color, and then the subcolors with it would be purple. So we've got our gray and our purple. This is halfway between black and white, and this is the overlap between blue and red. We bring in this kind of light gold tone, and then a turquoise. All right. So these colors actually tend to go well together. Let's look at what that would look like if we did a website with that mood board. What do you think? Interesting, huh? Like that? I look at this and to me, it's very cool. It's calming, right? I like the purple. It's eye-catching. I like the gold and the turquoise. You know, all nice. It fits together very nicely. But I would say the temperature of that page is cool. Here's our color mood board number 2. Now we've dropped gray down to being a secondary color. Purple is going to be our lead. Our kind of turquoise has gone really turquoise, right? And you know, our kind of goldish has gone a little bit more flesh tone, right? Now, if this was our color mood board, our homepage might look like this. I don't know about you, but this one is just like, man, this is really, man, it just pops right into your face. It's bold, right? So, you know, it's really kind of interesting because you know, take the same kind of palettes with the choice between the 2 dominant colors, purple or gray, and one gives you a very cool feeling, right, with some bright accents. This one is really bold with some cool accents, right? But it's kind of inverting the 2 colors, right? And then kind of saying, okay, which are you more comfortable with? You know, which would you think better fits the way we want the audience, the external environment, the larger public to view JRSA and its members? Some recommendations here on key phrases that you want to keep repeating as part of how you talk about yourself and JRSA and its members. So there's actually some suggested key phrases to make sure keep coming back over and over again. You keep repeating them. SACS, Code of Ethics, High Research Standards, System-Wide Comprehensive Perspective, and so on. And there you go. You guys have survived. All right. So, thoughts?
Remember, folks, you can put your thoughts in the question box or even in the chat and direct them to organizers and panelists.
Okay, I am going to turn off screen sharing at this point. All right. And now if I can just get rid of this, good. All right. Any thoughts, anybody? Quick observation, we have already started this process of rebranding, and some of you became aware of it in the last 24 to 48 hours when we started implementing the new software that we've gone through, and as part of the rebranding and getting ready to implement the rebranding, we've been essentially rebuilding the kind of behind the scenes infrastructure of JRSA. So the first thing that came online is the new member database. And I'm going to ask Jason to say some, describe that to you and point out some highlights and how it fits into this particular rebranding activity. So this has already started. We've got the new member database or the new member AMS. association management system and member database in place. Along with that is online discussion boards, right, which are the underpinning of our justice research community. And actually, I'm trying to see if I've got, I can go to, actually, let me share one more screen with you. This will give you an idea. Remember, I started out and I said, where we're headed is a rebranding, and that the rebranding is going to be built around 3 pillars. Let me give you a tease. This is not a full-blown redo of the homepage, but this will give you an idea what the homepage might wind up looking like. Can you all see that? Did I capture the right screen?
You did, yes. We can see the
Okay.
3 pillars on the mock homepage.
Yeah. Now you know, this doesn't change the color palette yet, except down here. But if you think about what the current homepage looks like, and then you look at this, you get a sense of kind of where we're headed. And you know, there is the justice research community, which is a set of online discussion boards, places where you can meet with your peers, do peer-to-peer learning, support each other, exchange ideas, ask questions, look at all the things that are in there: discussion boards, job boards, virtual coffee breaks, virtual meetups, virtual mentorships, article sharing, live water cooler talks, poll of the week, right? Go over next to it. This is a piece we're working on right now, the Justice Information Center, which you can think of as ISAR on steroids. All right, this is now going to be a searchable database that you can access, go into, and say, what are the resources that you have, whether they're, you know, issue briefs, policy briefs, fact sheets, methods briefs, infographics, white papers, research reports, whatever. Those will all be cataloged and accessible through a database that you can come to and say, I'm looking for information on X, maybe human trafficking, maybe policing practices that improve public safety in particular communities. You'll be able to find it there. It'll all be cataloged, right? And then over on the left side, the Justice Research Academy is our online learning management system. And what we're currently in the process of doing right now is pulling together all of the learning resources that we have created over the years, whether it was as part of the Smart Suite Academy done in conjunction with Michigan State University, that supports action research education for all of the Smart Suite grantees out of the Bureau of Justice Assistance. We're pulling together the resources from the Center for Victim Research that we've been the lead partner on for the past, what, 4 or 5 years, Susan? 5?
I think that's right.
Yeah, I think it's been 5 years. We've produced an enormous amount of learning resources. The Juvenile Justice Evaluation Center that we ran for years for OJJDP, all of the resources that we've developed for skill building and capacity building for the SJS program, all of those are going to be kind of pulled together, cataloged, put in our Justice Research Academy, and made accessible to our members and to interested parties from outside who are prospective members, where they can take advantage of learning units, resources that cover all of the things that you see here on the home page. So if you wanted a kind of a visual representation of what the rebranding is going to look like built around those 3 pillars, it's going to look a lot like this. Okay, Jason, are you available, and would you like to say a word about the AMS, because that's going to be the first place that a lot of our members are going to encounter what we've been doing and what we're up to.
Sure. Let me share my screen here.
Go ahead and do that.
All right. So the first step in the new software we've been implementing is we were in desperate need of a new association management software. The one we had was very dated and it just didn't serve the needs of JRSA staff or our members. So we selected a new online management system, and the nice thing is about this new one is it's much more modern. It makes it easier for our members to, you know, complete their tasks, such as you know, managing their staff that are linked to their accounts, paying their dues, allowing other people to pay dues, to sign up for events, to pay for events. It just makes the whole process of participating in those things easier, and we hope to you know, be back to doing that in person as soon as possible. But so if you are a SAC member or individual or institutional member, you should have received an email the other day that had a link to this login page and a reset your password link, because nobody had passwords in here. So if you did not get that, we will be you know, sending that out again, and you can contact me at jtrask@jrsa.org and I can send you the information. But once you're signed in, what you'll do when you have an account is you'll come to this login page, and if you log in, see if this will go. Of course, this happens now. Just a minute here. Never fails. I've been on here all day. All right, so once you log in, you know, this is, if you're a member, you'll see this information where it says how long you've been a member, when your membership expires, that kind of stuff. But that's not really the important stuff here that we wanted to go over today. We just wanted to show you that from this area, you'll see that you have access to the upcoming events here or the full calendar. If you click on these events, you know, it'll take you to some more information about them. You can register and all that. Typical events calendar. This is your profile page area. Well, from here, you can access your profile by either updating your profile or selecting your profile. And so once you go here, what we want everybody to do is come in here, and you'll see you can upload a picture, do all that stuff. But then here's the important information where you can update all of your information. And the one thing we really like about this new system is it gives us the ability to capture a lot more information, and, you know, things such as your areas of interest. So we've, you know, kind of created a list here, and it's obviously not all inclusive. And if you have suggestions for additions to it, I'm happy to take them too. And you're going to see some stuff here that, like member benefits, voting, person types, things like that, that you won't see. I'm seeing this because I'm an admin of the system. But then you'll also have skills where you can go in and identify any skills you have. And the reason these are important, and we think they're going to be, you know, useful to you, is, you know, with your areas of interest, we can use that information to better target information we push out to you. I mean, everybody gets too many emails, and, you know, if you're not interested in something, we're not going to, you know, we're not going to try to waste your time sending this stuff to you. Now, that's our end goal. It's going to take a little bit to get there, and people have to fill this out for this to be useful to us. But then with the skills, you know, part of JRSA in any organization is just this community. And with JRSA, with our, particularly with the SAC members, we have the mutual assistance program where we match members up with other members that can help them, you know, complete their tasks, or, you know, gain some knowledge they need to gain. And, you know, this skills area will help us identify people and better match people. And hopefully we can expand that out to just other membership too. When people are looking for somebody, you know, for some guidance on something they're working on, they can use this to help, you know, identify those people. So that brings me to this other area, which we think is important, and that is the, we hope to get these community forums going. You can access them here, or you can access them in this quick link bar over here. But we tried to create, you know, topics that cover the gamut of the criminal justice system, you know, from adjudication down to sentencing. And then you're going to have some other topics we'll add as they come in, such as Susan created this translating research one. And they've already been posting some stuff in here. So if you click on that, you can see the individual posts. And if you click into a post, you know, you can see Mark Myron, you know, posted some information here to get the discussions going, kind of seed these discussions for, you know, basically carrying over that discussion from yesterday here. And, you know, the thing that's great about these is usually, you know, you don't get to keep this information. We used to use basically like an email distribution list between the SACs, and you know, it was effective in its day to communicate with people. But you know, times have changed, and with the way that works, you can't even get through to half the people because of spam filters and everything else. Plus, any assistance any other SAC director would lend to another SAC director as far as advice or input, it's lost. You don't archive it, you know. So the benefit of this is, you know, we are going to have a SAC list, but then there's all these other forms as well. But you know, the information's archived. You don't lose it. It's not just a one email and thought, oh, that's great. What did Mark say about this? And you're searching your emails, you can't find it. You know, so this we hope will really be a big part of our community, you know, and people share information, exchange information. I mean, that's why we're an association. That's what's important, to be part of a community and help each other out, you know, because whatever project you're asked or tasked to do, you know, I can almost guarantee you some other SAC has been tasked with a similar task in another state. So why reinvent the wheel? So these are the discussion forums, and these, like I said, are basically organized on areas of the criminal justice system. Then we have the SAC discussion forum. Now these are restricted to our SAC members. They're a little different, and the SAC director, that's really the one that's going to take the place of that old SAC distribution list, you know, when SACs are looking for help. And then you'll see we also have created some that we're going to use with our Smart Suite work, with the MSU Smart Suite grant we were working on. So really, so if you click into these again, let's go to these. You see, Mark, they work really simple. You can just see here, you know, if you wanted to post a reply, you just come down here, type your reply, submit it. Now I see on these here, if it's your post, you'll see the ability to edit or delete it. I'm seeing all this other stuff, and I see them on all of them because I'm an admin. So you'll see a slightly different view. But I mean, that's really all there is to it. And from this site, you know, somebody who comes here to our site, you can also return to JRSA's main website. If you're in this area, you can create a profile. Now, I will say anyone in the public can view these, but you have to create a profile if you want to participate. So if you want to post a reply, you have to create a profile, but otherwise you can view it as a member of the public. But if you want to participate, you're going to have to create a profile. So we'll have the information on creating profiles, and you know, that'll go out in the post event email here. And so if you're interested and you're not already in our database, you know, you can create a profile and keep in touch with JRSA. You can indicate the areas of interest that you're interested in and help us better target information to you. But we hope that this will take off and people will use it. If anybody has any questions, or Susan, Jeff?
I was going to say, let me add one thing, because there is a button right in the middle of the screen right now. People should, if you're not familiar with discussion boards, one of the true joys of these things is the button up at the top that says subscribe, which, you know, instead of to stay informed, you have to have emails coming into your inbox every day that you got to look at them and say, is this worth keeping or not? Do I want to read it or not? What you can do is you can go to a discussion board and you can post a comment, you can read comments. And you don't have to keep going back to check and see if anything new has been posted. You just subscribe to it and you'll get an alert. And if I'm not mistaken, on most of these, and I'll be interested to see how ours works, you can either select to be notified once a week or in some cases overnight, so that you'll always know if some new post has been made. And so you know to go look and read it. But you don't go looking to check up and see if the discussion board's been updated, only to discover no, there's nothing new, and I kind of wasted some time I didn't need to waste. You'll know when somebody has added something to the discussion board. So that allows for asynchronous discussions, which is really our goal. We want to support you being able to interact with your peers, learn from your peers, help your peers, do mutual assistance, using the discussion boards as an opportunity to expand the engagement opportunities that occur with webinars or other offerings that we present. Maybe you know, there's not enough time at the end of the webinar for you to get your question in. Go to the discussion board, post it there, and then start a conversation. We have experimented with these in the past and had some difficulties with the software that we were using. This is more carefully integrated into the AMS and the member database, and also into our communication capability, our ability to target what we want to send out to people who have expressed an interest in knowing that information. So we're not, as Jason said, this is increasingly important. People don't want to be spammed to death. They don't want to be sent emails on topics that they're not interested in. Great, we are with you on that. Fill out your profile and we will make sure that the information that we're thinking about pushing out only goes to you if you've expressed an interest in that topic. Otherwise, yeah, we'll leave you alone. So it allows you to kind of customize what information gets pushed out to you. And then by using the discussion boards, it allows you to subscribe to boards that you can come to when there's been a change in the board that you want to check on. And you only get that for the boards that you've subscribed to. So again, we're trying to be responsive without being intrusive. I think that's enough, unless, does anybody have any questions or comments or reactions, thoughts?
Oh, one has come in.
All right.
Since one of your goals is to create a community, would it be important to have that in the new name? Will the discussion board allow us to search on keywords or topics? And will the webinar notices still get pushed out to everyone? There's three questions there. So the first one, since one of the goals is to create a community, would it be important to have that in the new name?
Yeah, you know, that's a really good question. I will tell you that the word that I kind of like, because it sounds modern. I mean, we could, you know, just kind of be the center for, although there's a gazillion centers out there. Many of them are, you know, kind of very, very small. So it's kind of like something a little bit more modern sounding and also, you know, set us apart a little bit. Personally, what I like is I like network. So it's like we are a hub. We are a meeting hub for our members. We're a hub for information exchange. We're a hub for mutual learning, right? I kind of like the network. Network sounds more appealing to me and kind of differentiates us, I think, a little bit better than calling us a center, or what we're, the center.
The word was community.
Yeah, the other possibility is to call it a community, and I'm fine with that. we'd want to think about, play around with different combinations of the words you would want in the name.
Mm-hmm.
What do you want to convey with the name? Because the name's an important, the name's important. So yeah, I mean, we're open to suggestions. The branding proposal gave us 4 to think about, but we are in no way restricted to any of the stuff in the rebranding proposal. I mean, we read it like knowledgeable consumers and say, for some of this, yeah, that makes perfect sense. That's great. Other parts of it, you might look at it and go, not yet. But we'll think about this. And part of the rebranding is, you do, as you're doing it, you kind of stop at each step and say, am I happy with where we're still headed? Or, did what I learned in taking this step lead me to think that maybe there's a slightly different path out there that was not in the original rebranding proposal? So, this is a matter of kind of continuous learning as you kind of incrementally work your way through everything that's in the rebranding plan. But I really do, the part of it that I like the most, that I'm most attracted to, is the 3 pillars.
The next question, and this is probably one for Jason, will the discussion board allow us to search on keywords or topics?
Yes, it is searchable.
Great. And finally, will the webinar notices still get pushed out to everyone? Jason, you talked about people indicating their areas of interest to limit what they receive. Will people still receive information about all of the webinars?
Right. So, I mean, what we're envisioning right now, I think, is there's some core JRSA things that we do and that our members are interested in, and those will continue to be pushed out to them. But, as we do more stuff and have more things to push out, that's where we'll really start to focus on individual topics and areas of interest that people have identified. But, we're always going to let our members and people who are in our database know that, we have a conference coming up, we have a webinar coming up.
And it's also true on the member page, as you pointed out, Jason, and I thought this was a great feature. Over on the right-hand side, there was the calendar. It's upcoming events. So, you always have the option when you're checking, when you're coming to the website, you log in, you go to the member page just to check everything, update things, whatever. You can always click on the calendar and just say, okay, what's in there? There might be something in there of interest that I didn't think I was interested in, but I am now. So yeah, we're not going. We're trying to thread the needle between swamping you with information that you don't want or need, but also making sure you get the information you do want and need. And that's where the profile can be really helpful.
All right, the only other comment in here is, this looks really good, Jason, great work. And I certainly have to echo that.
You have no idea how much work Jason put into getting just that first setup in place. And it's really exciting.
Right, and I will say too, this whole thing's brand new. It's going to be changing. Also, so I mean, you will notice some changes on this site in the upcoming weeks as we fine tune things and get it set up a little better.
Right. And we're open to suggestions. If anybody comes up with a really killer name, the one that just bowls everybody over, don't keep it to yourself. Actually, we should have a discussion board on JRSA names.
Right.
Let people go at it.
We can, and I'll also say that while you can create posts, you can't create discussion forums. So I'll create a forum that is for suggested forums. So if you think we need a forum on some other topics, we can visit those and think about adding them.
Right.
All right. Jeff, thank you for that walkthrough of everything that's under.
I can't believe it's 1 minute of 5. We got them out of here before quitting time.
All right, folks, so the event is over, but your responsibility is not. You will be receiving an email with your feedback survey. Please do take a moment. We have worked to make sure that it'll be really quick for you to complete. That's also your opportunity to request any copies of the slides. And it provides some more information about logging into the new MemberClick site that Jason just showed you. All right, so with that, I think we'll gavel it closed. We have a closing comment from one of our attendees, very exciting, and thank you for sharing this information. Looking forward to what's to come. So thank you so much. All right, good night, folks.